prize behind them to make this club extra unique going forward.
That was Greg Amsinger earlier today on the morning show talking about what the Cardinals need, which is a number 5 starter, and could that pitcher be Andre Pallante? With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Alex, yesterday was encouraging. It was a really good start for Andre Pallante. Gave the Cardinals exactly what they were looking for, honestly, and then some. And it reminded me back to what we saw the first time around with Andre Pallante, where that season, you guys remember early on, any hole that the Cardinals had, whether it was in the bullpen, in the rotation, just somewhere in between, he was the guy that filled it. You need a guy that can come in and get out lefties? I got you. You need a guy that can come in and stretch out a little bit, give you innings when Jordan Hicks is struggling to give you innings? I can do that. You need a guy to come in and be a number 5 starter for you. Guess what? I can come in and at least be adequate. He ended up with a 3.98 ERA as a starter in 2022. Started 10 games for the Cardinals, went about 54 innings, and ended up the Cardinals were 5-5 in his starts. That's fine. That's not great, but it's more than enough from your number 5 starter. Alex, if he became that again for them this year, if he was able to go out there and just replicate what he did in 10 starts for the Cardinals back in 2022, what would that mean for this team, the way they're currently constructed?
It means you saved your rotation. It means you saved your rotation for this season, because now you don't need to go out there and get your Brad Keller and just in hopes of somebody coming in. This is better than what Brad Keller can offer you if that's what he's providing to you. You know that you're not forfeiting. I know, sorry, T-Bone, your guy Brad Keller.
Oh, would you have to throw him under the bus like that?
He's 100% accurate on that.
You know you're not forfeiting one game every 5 starts, because that guy, whoever it is, this is the Pallante you're getting, he's going to give you an opportunity to win the game. And on top of it, you're strengthening your bullpen once again, because you're not overusing guys like Matthew Liberatore to try and fill this rotation. I mean, Andre Pallante could be this Cardinals team Superman when it comes to the rotation, because you don't have to spend money, you don't have to make a trade, and you get somebody who is going to keep you the opportunity to continue to win series.
Yeah, he saves the rotation and now will eventually provide depth when Steven Matz comes back. Now you have a 5th/6th starter for the St. Louis Cardinals. There is no more of this, oh, God, we don't have anybody if he's able to sustain this. So he's going to be able to save the rotation for the time being. To Alex's point, you're not forfeiting when you have that 5th starter spot come around. You at least have a chance. As you mentioned, they went 5-5 in his starts, and he had really solid numbers. So you have a chance when you have that starter on the mound. But I think the most important part about it is when Steven Matz does come back, assuming he does come back from this back injury, you now have Andre Pallante that you can say, okay, we now have a 6th starter. They thought Zach Thompson was going to be that guy. It's clear he cannot sustain velo. He's not going to be that guy for them this year. He's now more of like their 7th guy. They have Andre Pallante that can now take this role, hopefully, be the 5th starter for the time being, and then eventually move into that 6th starter role, or hell, beat Steven Matz out and push Steven Matz to the
I don't think that would be a bad thing at all.
No.
I think Steven Matz is a reliever. I think at some point, we got to admit as much. His $11 million salary is fine for a reliever. It's not what you want to pay a guy that's going to be in the middle innings. But if he can eat innings for you, it would be fine. If he can be a high leverage arm, and by the way, that's a weapon. If this team were to get to the playoffs, we're way too early for that. But if they were, that'd be a hell of a weapon to have out of your bullpen once you get to the postseason.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I mean, I would not put it. If you're giving me these types of production from Andre Pallante, Steven Matz is not my number 5. Steven Matz is my number 6, my swing man, and you're going to the rotation. Or you're going to the bullpen. Because now you don't have to overuse JoJo Romero like you've been doing. You got another lefty in there, and you know if a game gets out of hand or if somebody's dinged up, you can skip the start, and you can put Steven Matz in it. Steven Matz loses his job if Andre Pallante pitches like that.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. This one comes from the 314. Guys, just what the Cardinals needed. Another number 5 starter to go with our other 3 number 5 starters.
That's what I'm talking about, text line.
Is that a number 5 starter, though, if you're giving me those numbers?
Yeah.
From 2022?
A 4 ERA, yeah, that's, I mean, number 4, it's a back-end starter in some way.
I'll take it.
5 innings per start, a roughly 4 ERA. I would classify that as a back-end starter in one way or another. And the other thing is, like, there's no real upside here. And the reason why I say that, and this is why I've always probably been a little lower on Pallante than some others are, he just has no swing and miss. None whatsoever. And he has an unbelievable ground ball rate. He's at 62% even this year when he hasn't been great. There's value in that. You're keeping the ball on the ground. It means it's not flying out of the ballpark very often. Like, there's value in being a ground ball pitcher, and the Cardinals have utilized that for, 25 years now here in St. Louis to a great degree. But without the shift, and especially last year when you didn't have the same quality infield defenders, you lose a little bit of that effectiveness. And so this year, when we saw Andre Pallante early on, I was like, okay, so he's getting the ground balls, but they're getting hit a little harder. I just don't know what that means for you. And then the sinker wasn't playing. Like, there's just a lot that was there that didn't feel great. If he can be a guy now that ends up just giving you 5 to 6 innings regularly, and you just understand, hey, this is who he is. He's a 5-starter. He's going to be like what Dakota Hudson was early on, basically. Hey, man, you can win with that as your number 5 starter. And yeah, it sucks that you got 3 number 5 starters in your rotation, but guess what? Right now, they need 3 number 5 starters to be able to fill out the rotation. And if this is how you get to the trade deadline, still in the mix with an opportunity to trade for somebody that upgrades either this spot or the Lynn spot or the Michaelis spot, whoever, then cool. That's awesome, man. But they need somebody right now desperately to fill that spot in the rotation. They've tried basically everything else that they can. I think Andre Pallante gives them the best opportunity to be able to go out there and get legitimate production out of your number 5 slot in the rotation right now.
I really don't care in the middle of the regular season if you have 3 number 5s, as long as those 3 number 5s are giving you a chance to win baseball games. And that's why we've been glowing about Lance Lynn and Kyle Gibson, is because, yeah, they're number 5s on any contending team, but you're a team that's trying to make the playoffs, and they're treating it as their number 3s in your rotation. So if you're going out there and I'm told that every single game I'm getting 5 innings, at worst, 3 earned runs given up, and the strikeout numbers aren't there, but hey, I got a chance to win, I don't see the problem with that. This is where the lies in the problem of believing in this Cardinals team. You got to upgrade. You can't just sit there and say, well, Steven Matz is coming back, and now we got a competition in there. No, you need to upgrade. But
it's just as good as a trade.
Absolutely. But if you're gonna tell me that this is what I have in the regular season, I'm not gonna complain about it, because that's better than what you had a month ago.
And the other, it goes back to our conversations that we've had over the years about Dakota Hudson. Like, there are a lot of similarities, man, between Pallante and Hudson. Ground ball rates really high, walk rates that are bloated relative to what you'd expect out of guys that are typically ground ball, sinker ballers that get out of innings quickly and just rack up the pitches as they continue going along, eat those innings for you. That's where it gets a little tough for me to be able to see this as sustainable. He's got to limit the walks. If you can do that, I can buy into what Andre Pallante is as a starter, but he has to limit the walks. Yesterday, he did a really good job after the first inning of doing that, but he did have the first inning. And so we'll see what this looks like. Somebody on the text line also mentioned, hey, guys, he did that against the Reds. Let's see what it looks like against a quality lineup. Totally fair. The next time you'll see him is probably in Houston, and we'll see what he looks like against that lineup that's been hitting better lately. If he continues going there, he just keeps earning more starts. Right now, he has, at a minimum, earned another opportunity the next time through the rotation, and then we'll kind of play it by ear. My expectation is for the next 2 times through the rotation, you will see Andre Pallante out there. We'll see what it looks like after the first 3.
And just because he pitched well yesterday, and though, yes, he did earn another start, the Cardinals still should be scouring the market for a number 5 starter. They need to have more depth within the system. They need to try and find somebody that they can look to either claim, trade for, and either put them on the big league roster and then put Pallante back down in the minors, or get this person that they claim and put in the minors. They need to have 7 guys available to start, not including Steven Matz because he's on the IL. But right now, they just have 5. They need to still be looking for depth because they still need to be replenishing that pipeline.
All right, we got this from the 636, and it goes into the next point that I wanted to make. Guys, I think this is officially the team that we expected it to be at the start of the season. The Cardinals have a great offense, innings-eating pitching, and that's their formula to win. So I saw this stat. This comes from Brendan Schaefer over on Twitter. Cardinals record when scoring 3 or fewer runs so far this season, 7-22. Score 3 or fewer, you basically lose 1 out of every 3 games. Excuse me, you basically win 1 out of every 3 games. When you score 4 or more, though, 20-5. 20 of the 25 times that they have scored 4 or more runs this season, they go on to win that game. Guys, it ain't hard to figure out what the formula is for this team. They were constructed a very specific way. Go out there, score a bunch of runs, play solid defense, get to the back end of the pin, win the game, shake hands. That's how they're constructed, and we all knew it coming into the season. Our questions were not about this offense. Our questions were about the rotation. Well, the rotation has some questions right now. The offense, meanwhile, is raking. I don't know how sustainable it is if you don't continue getting significant production out of Arenado and Goldie. You need those guys. Eventually, you're going to need Wilson Contreras to get back into the mix. Eventually, you're going to need Jordan Walker's big right-handed bat at some spot in this order. But right now it's working, and we're seeing what the results are because this is the formula. This is the way that this roster was constructed, and when it's going well, man, it's a hell of a lot of fun to watch, honestly.
Yeah, it shouldn't be surprising. We said it at the beginning of the season, and that's why I was so out on this team for the first month and a half, was your offense looked dead, and if you had no offense, you weren't winning baseball games. The pitching, I didn't think it would sustain. I still don't think it's going to sustain as good as it has been, but your offense is clicking, and when your offense is scoring that many runs, that's the formula. That's what John Mozeliak put together, an offense that was from top to bottom dangerous.
Yeah, an identity for the team, and I still thought this, even though the offense was struggling early on, and to your point, why it wasn't having success and why they're so bad and when they score 3 or 4 runs, it has to be their offense, because the starting pitching, a quality start is what 3 runs or fewer. Well, a lot of times you're probably going to get 6 innings, 3 earned runs from a Kyle Gibson or a Lance Lynn, or even a Andre Pallante yesterday with the exception. What you have to have is the offense that rakes. And when they are doing that, and I agree, I don't think it's sustainable if you're not getting production.
It's a hard way to win. This is a hard way to win.
Yeah, it's a hard way to win, especially if Goldie and Arenado aren't the guys that are leading the charge with that. Now, Goldie's playing better of late. We'll still see if Arenado's that guy after having a good game 2 days ago. But that is the formula. The formula is the offense rakes and they score 4+. Your rotation gives up 3. And then the bullpen, hopefully, maybe they give up one little blip on the radar, give up a run. So you need 4 to 5 runs to win every baseball game.
Yeah, it's not easy. It's like being the Edmonton Oilers. You might get to the Stanley Cup Finals with this way of winning. It ain't easy. It's going to be a heart attack every single night, and you're going to need your stars to come through. That's how it works in the NHL. That's how it works in baseball. We all know this. All right, coming up in 15 minutes, we got to dive into some NFL quick hitters. Another huge contract given out to a wide receiver. This one coming in the form of Jalen Waddle. The Miami Dolphins now have 2 of the 5 highest paid receivers in the NFL. Is that something that can work long term? We'll talk about that coming up in about 15 minutes. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. YouTube is up and running. YouTube.com/101ESPN STL. That's where the graveyard chat is going right now. Coming up next, Lars Nootbaar left the game again yesterday with an injury. Is this just something we're going to have to deal with him? And are the Cardinals well situated to deal with a potential IL stint by Noot if that's the way this goes? Talk about it next year on 101 ESPN.
I'm going to get a read here shortly. As soon as we're done with media, I'll have a better idea from Adam as to what's going on. But just kind of felt something on his side, so I didn't want to play through it. So we took him out, put Carlson in, and we'll take another look at it here shortly.
Another potential injury for Lars Nootbaar with Alex and T-Bone on BK audio, courtesy of Bally Sports Midwest. Lars Nootbaar, feels like this is just something we're going to have to deal with him. He seems to go to the injured list a few times every season, starts out the season a little slow, eventually heats it up, and then the second half goes on this tear. And if that's just who he is, I think the Cardinals can live with it given the way that the team is currently constructed. But Alex, do you think it's fair to say that Lars Nootbaar at this point appears to be an injury-prone player?
Yeah, I mean, 2 seasons where he couldn't get past 120 games played. I think it's fair to look at it and say he's not a 140, 150 type of outfielder for this team.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think it is injury prone. And the reason that, early on, I remember having this conversation about Tyler O'Neill when he was here with the Cardinals. And I remember early on being like, no, I don't know if it is injury prone because it was weird, fluky injuries. It was like hit on the hand, a broken hand, dealing with little things like that. Maybe there was a muscle injury here or there. But at the time, I thought, okay, well, that's just a fluke. Eventually, he's not going to be that guy. He'll be able to stay healthy. As we learned, guess what? He's on the IL again today. He placed on the IL yesterday with the Red Sox with knee inflammation after they just went to Tampa Bay, by the way.
That's amazing.
Lars Nootbaar, the reason I'm starting to think he's more injury prone is more of his injuries don't really feel like flukes. There's the muscle injury now that it appears. We'll see what the injury status is probably tomorrow when they announce it. But it's potential that he could hit the IL with something in his side that's muscular. And then you've got the ankle injury that he dealt with last year. And then you've got the rib that breaks when he goes up against the wall. Like, it's just constantly something that is new. And it's not just these fluke injuries. Sliding into second base and kind of spraining an ankle is a injury that happens. The muscle here and then breaking your rib against the wall. Like, that one's more of a fluke, but the other ones just feel like something that is going to be sustainable to where it is. Hey, you probably have to prepare for him to only play 120 to 130 games, and I think they're well positioned for that this year, but I don't know how well you can really sustain that looking forward in terms of the long term with Lars Nootbaar.
So his injuries since the start of last season, a thumb injury, a back issue, a heel issue, an abdomen issue, and then starting this year you have the ribs and now the hamstring and potentially an oblique. I don't want to speculate too much on what it is, but it looked potentially like looked like it was a rotation injury, which tends to be an oblique. But those are the kinds of things that make me a little concerned. Oblique issues don't go away very quickly. This is what Matt Carpenter dealt with, and it kept him out of the lineup for like 6 weeks, I think.
Yeah.
So I hope that's not the case. I do think they are more well situated to deal with an injury right now from Lars Nootbaar than they have been in previous seasons. And the reason is because you've got outfielders that are hitting. Like Alec Burleson, if he needs to go out there, can play in the outfield for you on a regular basis for the next couple of weeks. Now, it's not going to be ideal. He's not the defensive player that Lars Nootbaar is. But if you're looking at just bat for bat, he's got some similarities in terms of like the overall production. They go about it in different ways. But Burleson can be out there and give you similar production to what Lars Nootbaar did previously. And I think Burleson's been better defensively this year than he was in the outfield last year. So you've got him. You've got Brendan Donovan. You can put Carlson out there, platoon one of those 2 spots if you want to, versus left-handed pitchers. I think you're okay in the outfield. And, oh, by the way, you actually have a center fielder this year with Michael Ciani playing well defensively in center field. So I think you're more well-situated this year than you have been in previous seasons. But, Alex, the natural question that a lot of people are going to be asking is, if Newt does go to the IL, is the corresponding move bringing Jordan Walker back up, in your opinion?
I wouldn't, no. Because I think you have so many guys that are hitting right now that I wouldn't bring Jordan Walker up because, one, I don't really think he's figured it out in Memphis. I would say he still needs to work on whatever he's working on. And, 2, I don't see how he's getting regular playing time because you need to keep Alec Burleson's bat in the lineup. You need to have Brendan Donovan and Michael Ciani in the outfield, and your infield is pretty much set now with Nolan Gorman hitting. And if you bring Jordan Walker back up, I think you would say we'll put him in right field. But the bats are going to be the question of how you're getting those in there. So, no, I would keep him down there. And, frankly, I would bring up somebody that just becomes a bench bat for you.
Yeah, I think they are I don't think you call up Jordan Walker because he's still not hitting for any power. I just looked up his last night. He's not even slugging 400 down in the minors.
I think he got a double yesterday. That's the first extra base hit he's gotten.
Yeah, he's got
he's
no
been
homers.
doing well with the doubles. It's the homers that are the problem.
He had 2 doubles the other day. He's up to 8 now on the season, but no home runs, still hardly any power. The slug is not above 400.
In his last 19 games, he's batting .295, which is great. He's hitting for average again, which is what you'd expect. But he's slugging .420.
Yeah.
And that's with seven doubles in his last 19 games.
Yeah, so I don't think he's the guy you call up. Now, with that being said, I think they are situated fine in terms of from an offensive standpoint to sustain this. I don't know if they are defensively because I think what's going to happen is their best alignment is probably Burleson in left and Donovan in right. I think it might be more of Burley in right because he's got a better arm. Yeah, he's got a better arm. But to me, you're not very good defensively then as a whole in the outfield. Center field, you're above average.
Center field, you're elite.
Elite. Left field, you're probably above average. Right field, you're probably average at best, is what I would say. So I think defensively, you end up being worse off. Now, the problem is then what are you doing at DH as well? Who's going to take over that role?
Carpenter, baby.
Yes.
I'm serious. I think he's your best option.
But the other thing that I think what they're going to have to balance, and this is where we've talked about this before, especially when the offense was really scuffling, is, okay, how do you balance your defense with offense? Because I think the best defense that they can go with now is Carlson and Wright. But he can't hit right-handed pitching. Yep. He can't hit at all, really. But I think that's where I think it's going to be interesting to see where they go with, because I'm with you, Alex. I don't think you call up Jordan Walker yet. I don't think he's shown enough progress down in the minor leagues to get reps here. But I don't know what you do in terms of your outfield defense to try and balance the offense that you were getting from Nootbaar and keep your hot bats in the lineup, but also try and stay above average defensively in the outfield.
I think Michael Ciani gives you at least somewhat of a safety net to cover some of your flaws in the outfield position right now. And even if Carlson can't hit the certain side of the pitcher, you got him as a defensive replacement if Burleson's out there for you.
I'm going to give you the numbers for Jordan Walker when he came up last year. All right. Based on what he had done, let's go the last 12, 15 games prior to him getting the call up. So the last 4 series for Jordan Walker. It was 14 games, 285 batting average, 518 slugging percentage, 4 doubles, 3 home runs in that stretch. But his time down in AAA, he had a 400 slugging percentage. Overall, in AAA last year when he was sent down before he got the call back up, right around a 400 slugging percentage. He had the home run in the game right before he was called back up. If Walker hits a couple home runs over the next few games, I could totally see them hey, let's see if we can get through this series in Philadelphia. Let's see what happens with Walker over the next week or so. This time next week, it's going to coincide potentially with his bobblehead night. I promise you that is not my intention here, but it would be interesting if that's when they make the call up. If Walker heats up a little bit, I wonder if eventually they just say, listen, the kid is 22 years old. He's not going to hit for power yet. We're just going to have to live with this. And for right now, he's just going to be a high average, low slugging percentage player. He's going to be on the ground more often than we're comfortable with. And we're going to have to do this thing where he learns at the big league level. My hope was that he would go down to AAA and dominate AAA pitching. And with average, he kind of has. He's at a 295, 300 batting average so far down there. That's awesome. Spectacular. You love to see it. He might just not hit for power, guys. It's totally possible Walker will not hit for power until he's 24, 25 years old. He's just going to come into it as he continues to age. Some of that is swing. Some of that is pitch recognition. Some of that is being able to lay off of that low fastball that is giving him a lot of trouble right now, or the low and away slider that it gives him some trouble at the big league level. It's possible they just have to come to the conclusion, hey, he's going to be a 7-hole hitter for us right now. We've got guys around him that are going to hit for power and for average. Let's let Walker just sit at the 7-hole and be a high average hitter for us for the next couple of seasons and let him continue to develop at the big league level. It's hard to do, but he's good enough defensively now, and he's got the average in a place where I think that could be okay for Walker.
See, I wouldn't do that because if he hit 16 home runs last year at the big league level, he can hit for power at this age. And that's where I would push back on that and say, no, they should be expecting him to hit for power. Not 30 home runs. If they have that aspiration this season, then they're freaking crazy. But I don't think that's what they're hoping for. I think they're hoping to see more line drives, and they're hoping to see that those will carry out because of how strong he is. He hits 20 home runs total last year between AAA and the majors. He's at 0 combined this year. If he's not hitting for power, he's not coming up. That is as simple as it gets. Next year will be the season in which they can say...
What if he hits 2 home runs in the next week?
No, because I want to see it over a sustained period that he starts to show some power. And I'm not saying like you go on a tear of like 10 home runs in a 20-game stretch, but let's see it be sustainable. Right now, it's not sustainable. He's not hitting for any power. So I would say no. And I think they should have an expectation that he hits for power because that's his body type. He should be able to.
I agree with you, but
not necessarily lift the ball. That's become like the dirty word of, he's got to lift the ball, launch angle. No, hit line drives, and with his strength, some of those will leave the ballpark. He had 16 last year. It should be totally fair for them to say, you need to start hitting for power before you start seeing Major League time again.
I won't be a hypocrite because I said when they sent him down originally that you need to stick with the guy and let him figure it out at the Major League level. But I would still keep him down there until you figure it out. I think your offense is clicking right now that you don't need him in your lineup and just squeeze the juice out of this lineup as much as possible. And when guys start falling off, that's when you need a Jordan Walker back. But if you bring him up, into BK's point, don't be wishy-washy with this. Put him in the lineup. Keep him in the lineup, even if he's struggling. Let him take all of his at-bats. If you're going to bring him up this time, this is the last time he goes back down to Memphis. It's time to bring him and leave him so he figures it out at the Major League level.
One other thing that I would say to that point, Alex, is, and I'm with you, if I was going to play devil's advocate, T-Bone, on Walker and like the timing of it, it's a pretty good timing with what's happening around Walker in the lineup to be able to bring him up because there would be no pressure. This would not be a situation where they're calling him up out of desperation. The rest of the lineup is producing. Pressure is off, Walker. Like, you went down, you had some success in terms of the batting average at least, even though the power wasn't there. And it is a little concerning to me, but not overly so because, like you said, T-Bone, there was some power last year. If you bring him up now, if Noot does end up going on the injured list and he just replaces him in right fields, you now have a capable outfielder out there, and it's crazy to say that, but I think he's capable, and you have a guy that you're just plugging in towards the bottom of your order and say, hey, no pressure. The rest of this lineup's producing, man. Just go out there, play your game. And you've got him around hitting coaches that last year were able to get him right. Last year, they did kind of figure it out on the fly. Now, some of that happened like the week before he got up to the big league level, so maybe people want to give credit to the AAA hitting coaches. Fine. If I'm not mistaken, I think one of those guys is now at the big league level. But you've seen them fix some of the other bats now in the order this season. Turner Ward, Brandon Allen, those guys have made it work with Paul Goldschmidt. They have found a way to get Mason Wynn from where he was at the end of last year to where he is right now, which is one of the best young hitters in Major League Baseball. So I think there's at least some trust that has been built up with the coaching staff. I could see it going either way. I will not criticize them if they do or don't call him up. I will understand both perspectives. It's a bad radio stance, but it's my honest belief of they're in a really interesting spot with Jordan Walker if Lars Nootbaar does end up going on the injured list for a little bit.
I don't think the Cardinals would call what he's doing right now a success, and I would agree with that.
I think you're right.
And that's why I don't think he can be called up.
But there's enough there to make you wonder, are we about to head into the upward trajectory? Because this is what it looked like last year at AAA right before he started hitting for power. I don't know the answer to that. They would know, and certainly he would know a lot better than I do. I haven't been watching his games down in Memphis, to say the least.
If you're winning baseball games, I don't know if I want to add a project to the team right now.
That's the thing, too.
But you're going to potentially have a project either defensively or offensively in the outfield. And honestly, like, it's really less of a Burleson versus Walker conversation and more of a Carpenter versus Walker conversation.
Here's where I would push back on that point, and this is probably where we're in the same page here. Those projects are like 3-week, 4-week projects. You know, this is a project that can change the outcome of the franchise for the next 10 years.
I think this is an off-season project.
Yeah, like he cannot be called up just because of like, hey, good vibes, 278. Like, no, this is not a success. He's got to start hitting for power. That is Jordan Walker's game. And if he's not a guy that's going to be 20 home runs,
average.
I think when he gets more to prime Jordan Walker, it's going to be less average, more power. I think he's going to be like a 250 hitter that can hit really? 25 to 30 home runs.
I don't view him that way at all. I view him as a 280 hitter. Like, I think he's more like the Matt Holliday type of hitter, Derek Lee type of hitter than like on the Nolan Gorman spectrum somewhere. I think he's definitely going to be an average on-base guy that ends up hitting for 25-ish home runs.
I agree with that. And I've always felt that. Derek Lee's been the comp for me for the longest time with him. But it doesn't feel like the Cardinals feel that way. It feels like the Cardinals are wanting him to be a 30 to 35 home run hitter.
But I think they want him to be that with the average. I think the reason why they see such a high ceiling with Jordan Walker is they think he can be all of what we just said.
And that's why I don't think you could bring him up, because it feels like there's this mixed messages right now of what we want from you. And I just, when a team is reeling like this, I don't know if I want to put a guy in that position that I need something out of when I've got guys that are hitting for me right now. And if I take a step back defensively.
But is it better to call him up when he's better? Or when the team around him is better, or when the team around him is struggling? Because they're not going to be hitting like this for the rest of the season. Like, it's unsustainable. You can't have 6 guys in your order with an OPS of 1,000. So like,
I agree
right
with that
now is ideal for the supporting cast.
Agreed, but my hope with this team is only 1 or 2 pieces fall off and the others are still hitting. Like, it's still, you're getting support, but a couple of guys fall off, and that's where Jordan Walker comes in. I don't bring him up if everybody falls apart, because that's a bad situation to be in. It's really a sticky spot. I just, for how this team is reeling off series wins right now, and now you're going to take on the Phillies, the Astros, and then you're coming back home. I don't know if I want to look at Jordan Walker being like, hey, we lost Nootbaar, we need you now.
Yeah, and I think he needs seasoning in AAA. And I was critical of the Cardinals for sending him down.
I was too.
Last year. For whatever reason, something's gone wrong in terms of, if you want to call it development in his swing, whatever it is, he still needs seasoning in AAA. Even though the situation is good, Walker's not in a good spot hitting-wise that he should be up at the big league level.
He's Tanner Hendrickson. That's Alex Ferrario. I'm Brandon Kiley. Questions and answers in 10 minutes. NFL Quick Hitters coming up next. You're on 101 ESPN.
Tara Hendricks near the Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Cardinals beat the Reds yesterday 5-3 as they take 2 of 3 from Cincinnati. They are off today. They'll be back in action tomorrow night when they visit the Philadelphia Phillies. 5:40 will be first pitch tomorrow night. Miles Michaelis will be on the mound for St. Louis against Aaron Nola for the Philadelphia Phillies. And tonight here on 101 ESPN, we've got Game 5 of the Eastern Conference Finals in the NHL Stanley Cup playoffs between the New York Rangers and Florida Panthers with pregame coverage starting at 6:30. The Sports Update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
All right, let's dive into some NFL quick hitters. Big news in the NFL earlier today. The Miami Dolphins have agreed to a contract with Jalen Waddle, Alex. It's a 3-year deal worth $85 million. 76 million. 76 of the $85 million are fully guaranteed at the moment that he signs that contract. He is now, by average annual value, the 4th highest paid wide receiver in the NFL. Of those top 4, 3 contracts have been signed this offseason. A.J. Brown at $32 million, Amon-Ra St. Brown at $30 million, and now Jalen Waddle, $28.5 million. Tyreek Hill sits in at number 3 at $30 million a year. Alex, what did you think of the deal this morning when you saw it come down for the Miami Dolphins and for Jalen Waddle?
Good deal for both of those teams. You got to get it done because the longer you wait, the more the money goes up. The first thing I thought of when I saw it was the Dallas Cowboys are thinking, son of a... Now we got to pay CeeDee Lamb. And CeeDee Lamb is going to be getting more than all of those, I think. But it made sense for Miami. It's very obvious where their identity is. It's the wide receivers. It's the offense. You better hope Tua is good. And if not, you just pay another quarterback. But you needed to lock him up. But now wide receivers around the league are going to start getting money around that criteria.
Yeah, I love the deal for Miami because this is what Miami is. It's about the wide receivers. I know they're like talking, do we extend Tua? Do we do this? Yeah. Oh, look, we've got Tua. No, Tua ain't the guy that's driving this ship. It's Tyreek Hill. It's Jalen Waddle. Pay those guys, get them locked up, and then figure out what you're going to do at the quarterback position.
It's speed, too. I mean, with Waddle and Hill, you know what you have. You have guys that are going to beat cornerbacks in games one-on-one.
I'm pretty surprised they got this done, if I'm being honest with you guys. I don't know that I would have done this if I was the Miami Dolphins this early. And the reason why is because like Tyreek Hill has a potential out in his contract after next year where they can cut him and end up with just $22 million in dead cap. So maybe you do that. Maybe you cut him, maybe you trade him, maybe you decide to move on from Tyreek Hill. But his cap hit next year is $35 million. The cap hit the following year is $55 million. You got to do something with Tyreek Hill next year at his age 31 season. Either extend him or move on from him most likely. And if you're going to do that, I don't know that I want Tyreek and Waddle making $60 million combined over the next few seasons. It's kind of similar to what Philly is doing, I suppose. It's just a really fragile way to build a roster. I've got 2 wide receivers making $60 million of my $200 million salary cap, and I'm potentially going to be paying my quarterback $40 million a year. So half of my cap is going towards 2 wide receivers and my quarterback. I don't know, man. I understand that he's a really good football player. I would like to have Jalen Waddle long term. I think I would have either moved on from Waddle after this season via trade or moved on from Tyreek Hill after the season via trade or cut. I think that would have been the smart way to go about it. It ain't going to be fun. Dolphins fans don't want to hear that. That's for sure because he's a good football player and you want to keep all those guys. But, man, this is a really risky move, in my opinion, by Miami. I would actually kind of zig while everybody else is zagging here. I'm not sure I like the decision by the Miami Dolphins to extend Jalen Waddle today.
I think before you commit to money to Tua, you're going to have to figure out if Tua's the guy.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it was, at least for me, smart what you did because you know the identity of this team. It's your wide receivers, it's your weapons, and you're about to find out if your quarterback can get it done. Because if you can't one up what you just did with these playmakers, then you need to move on from the quarterback before you pay him $40 million.
I feel like we know what Tua is by now, though.
Yeah,
like, I think we saw a pretty good version of Tua Tagovailoa last year. I think we saw the ceiling of what this roster is as currently constructed, though, with Tua and with Tyreek and with Jalen Waddle. And I wouldn't want to build around that long term. I don't know that what they are is something that can work for the postseason in January when you're having to travel to Buffalo and Baltimore and Cleveland and Kansas City. I don't know that that works in those markets in the month of January, given the way they're constructed around those guys. I think they're going to be worse defensively this year as well, which is problematic considering last year their defense was an issue for them by the end of the season.
Yeah, if I had to guess, my guess is they're going to look to get out of Tyreek's deal next year because now that he's into his 30s, he's the one that I don't think is going to age very well because he is speed-oriented. The moment it goes, you see that one little step come a little bit. He slows down just a little bit with his step.
Sure.
He all of a sudden becomes a less valuable wide receiver. So maybe he's the one they look to get out from under. But I don't mind the approach of potentially going with your big three of two big wide receivers and a quarterback because, A, the quarterback is the toughest position to find. And I would argue, I know like wide receivers become the big thing of like, wow, look at all these wide receivers go in the first round. I would argue that those are the two most important positions right now in football. And if you've got two of the best in the league, lock them up, and then you can draft and figure out defense and all of that other stuff and all the other positions in the draft that you need to. I don't mind with the big portion of your cap going to your quarterback and two of the best wide receivers in football.
All right, next thing up here. T-Bone, you mentioned this during the break. Sounds like Giants reporters are suggesting that it's all Daniel Jones, full steam ahead for them.
Yeah, apparently one of the Giants reporters that was watching them at camp, or OTAs, I should say, said it is obvious that Daniel Jones is QB1. Drew Lock and Tommy DeVito are not close to him, which it must be a really bad quarterback room if that's the case.
It doesn't surprise me at all. I didn't think Drew Lock or Tommy DeVito was going to be it, but I also think this is the hype up of Daniel Jones. This is what we've got, and we got to figure out how to make this work.
I just wouldn't want to be a Giants fan right now. Like, the worst thing you can possibly hear is, hey, the guy that you all hate that has clearly shown he is not good enough to be the long-term answer for you at quarterback, he is so far and away better than any of these other options that are in camp that none of them are even going to push Daniel Jones this year. It's not a surprise. We've seen Drew Lock. We know what he is. I like Drew Lock. He's a nice backup. He's like the 35th best quarterback in the NFL. You don't want him starting for you long-term. You also don't want Daniel Jones starting for you long-term, but he's like the 30th best quarterback in the NFL. So it doesn't surprise me at all that he's potentially going to be the answer once again in 2024. For Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Coming up in 15 minutes, the Cardinals appear to have finally produced the left-handed power hitter that they've been lacking. But next, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers here on 101 ESPN. With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Let's get into questions and answers. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get them in right now. The YouTube chat as well is another place you can go for that. YouTube.com/101ESPN-STL. Guys, do you think that the Cardinals should make a move for Jorge Lopez? Did you guys see what happened with him yesterday for the Mets?
Yes.
Kind of freaked out a little bit, didn't he?
And I would say absolutely not. I don't think you need that head case in this clubhouse.
He's not a good vibes guy.
Yeah.
And we're pro good vibes.
Yeah.
No, BK, they don't need
I
him.
like how he tried to defend it. He's like, hey, whatever happens, happens after this, you know?
And I love how he's like, I'm on the worst bleeping team in baseball.
Yeah. Whatever happens, happens. If they want me here, great. I'll be here tomorrow.
Dude,
And
did you just
weren't.
realize what you said?
Yeah.
So you for sure wouldn't?
No. I know his numbers are good. I can see you over there. Like, you're looking at that ERA, and you're like, woo.
What about that 37?
Yeah, no. He's not a guy. I'll be curious. Somebody's going to pick him up. I think Baltimore should pick him up. They need bullpen help.
I know
but,
him. He's been there.
Yeah. So they have an idea of his personality, but I would not. That seems like too much of a head case for a team that has basically been saying all offseason long, we're all about good vibes. Doesn't scream good
They're
vibes.
playing well.
Imagine his response when this team goes into a down spiral of 2 weeks of bad
Cut
baseball.
him. Like that's the thing that's positive about it is it's almost zero risk whatsoever. You go out there, you sign him, and if he sucks, cool, you're cut. Pew, get out of here. I would consider it. I would absolutely consider it. You got to check the background. He had a bad moment, man. Like, he had a really bad moment and then said some crap that you wouldn't want to hear from a player afterwards. But I don't know. I wouldn't want that to define me if I had a really bad moment and then the rest of my career I'm just, like, banished from baseball for throwing my glove into the stands. It's not like he did something that was, like, heinous. Yeah, I'd consider it.
I don't think he should be banished from baseball. I just don't think he fits this locker room. You know,
You
were
got
talking
enough
about
dudes in there that I think you can take on somebody like that, though. And also,
Maybe.
like, again, he had a bad moment. I don't even know that he's a bad teammate. I have no idea if he's a bad teammate. Now, his comments weren't great. That's not something that you necessarily want to hear, but I don't know. I would really consider bringing
feels
him
like a
in.
Jack Flaherty type of personality, you know?
Like they'll throw their catcher under the bus at some
Yeah.
point.
Yeah. Feels like that kind
And
of
if
guy.
he does, get him out of the locker
Here's,
room.
here's,
Do you really
How about
need him
this?
in your bullpen right now, though?
I think you could use him. I think this bullpen could use...
I think you got other areas to work on.
Well, sure, but you can do both, right? You can walk and chew gum at the same time.
I think if they're not going
Well,
to
I
go get
can't.
Brad Keller, I don't think they're going to go get a Jorge Lopez after this.
Very different role. Like Ryan Lutzis.
Dude, we
he hasn't
traded Randy
thrown-
Rosarena for a video.
Fair, but like Ryan Lutzis has not thrown in a game yet since being added to the roster like a week ago. Could I upgrade that spot in my bullpen? Yeah.
I
Could I
think-
do so via Jorge Lopez coming in and giving you 20 innings over the next few weeks?
I think the Cardinals and Mo make it very clear they have standards, and I think after that one comment, which shouldn't define him, I think that makes it to the point where the Cardinals say, no, doesn't meet our standards.
I think Ollie could handle him. I think he'd be fine. 314-399, and I'm serious.
That was the least surprising comment I could have heard.
I mean,
I say no.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers from the 636. Guys, do you think that the Blues could trade for Brady Tkachuk this offseason, Alex?
No, not at all. No, sorry. I think the Blues have the pieces to trade for Brady Tkachuk, but I think the Ottawa Senators aren't trading Brady Tkachuk.
I think they could.
I think
they should just offer them everything and say, hey, you guys want Enterprise? Here you go.
I think the Enterprise?
The Enterprise Center. Just
Wow.
Where are we going to play?
we'll figure it out.
Fine. We can go to Ottawa.
Centene.
Oh, man, we got to go play in Ottawa.
I think you're more. I think you could.
OTTOWA.
I think you're more like Ottawa. I think you're more likely to trade for their 7th overall pick or one of their defensemen before you could trade for Brady Tkachuk. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line from the 618. I think T-Bone, this is a T-Bone saying, can you guys please explain what you mean when you say a player needs some seasoning in the minors? What is it? Is it the length of time for someone to get seasoning? What exactly do you mean when you say that?
I would say it's length of time and then working on repetition?
Repetition? Is that what you're going for?
Repetitiveness. Yeah, repetition. Whatever.
I didn't know what you were going for.
Basically, what Jordan Walker needs to do
Reps.
is
Just say reps.
He needs to find that swing that is hitting line drives and be able to repeat it constantly, instead of like the one-off where it is, oh look, he just hit a line drive double in the gap, and then he goes like 12 at-bats, 15 at-bats without a double. Like, that's the part that is the issue for him, and he's got to find a way to lay off that pitch away. And that one is harder to simulate in the minor leagues because those guys are trying to get to the big leagues, so they may not try and go with that pitch. But he's just got to find a way to be able to repeat the same swing over and over and over again and hit for power.
I think repeatability is what you were looking for there.
Yeah, I think repetition was what I was looking for, but...
Reputation or repetition?
Repetition, probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just say reps. It's easier.
Yeah, whatever.
All right.
That's what abbreviations are for.
This is why
That's
I have
Tanner.
a
He's
saying.
Alex. I'm BK. Coming up in 15 minutes. T-Bone real upset about Coleman Hawkins. I'll tell you why in a little bit.
son
But
of a
next,
gun.
the Cardinals have been lacking a true left-handed power bat that has come through their system and developed at the major league level. I think we finally have seen it done. We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN.
Swing and a high fly ball, just missed it. Fraley drifts back, still going at the 370 sign. That ball carries out. Unbelievable. That was a routine pop-up, and it just kept back spinning over the fence into the first row, and Nolan Gorman has hit a solo homer to extend the lead.
That's what it sounded like yesterday on Bally Sports Midwest. Nolan Gorman is the first pure power left-handed hitter the Cardinals have developed through their system since Chris Duncan, maybe? I mean, it's been a while. We're talking about almost 20 years since we've seen a player like this groomed by the St. Louis Cardinals. With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. You got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Alex, the only left-handed hitter in Major League Baseball right now with more home runs this season than Gorman is Gunnar Henderson, who's probably the favorite currently to win the American League MVP. He leads all of Major League Baseball in wins above replacement. He has 18 home runs in 54 games so far for the Baltimore Orioles. The guy is unbelievable. Left-handed hitter, Gorman's age or younger. He's one of the best lefty power bats right now going in Major League Baseball. This is something the Cardinals have failed to produce, and he's doing it with the exact profile that you see from, like, Kyle Schwarber. Lots of strikeouts, good walk rate as well to keep that on-base percentage up, low batting average, and a really good slugging percentage. Alex, as you're watching this right now and you're seeing what Nolan Gorman is doing, what he's able to accomplish with this power presence in the middle of your order, how are you feeling about it? How are you feeling about watching this profile of player in the Cardinals lineup, something we have not seen a lot of?
I mean, I'm feeling really good about it because what it does is it lengthens the lineup for this team. It provides the fear factor once you get past the 3-4 hitters who I know haven't really been scary this season, but when it's clicking, you have that power threat that's lower in the lineup, which is something that it really feels like the Cardinals have been desperate for. I mean, when you talk about having this left-handed presence, we talk so much about how, and T-Bone talks so much about how it's going to matter in the playoffs and you need this type of guy. And, you know, the Cardinals have held on to all of these left-handed hitters, and now you're starting to see why. You're getting different profiles from all of them with the on-base and the strong, the strength of Alec Burleson, and then now you've got the power of Nolan Gorman. You're seeing the depth of this lineup, and frankly, for the Cardinals, it creates more of a fear factor for this team that you thought they were going to have at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, it's the left-handed bat that they haven't just been missing for the regular season. It's the one they've been missing for the playoffs. Like, the best pure power-hitting left-handed bat that they last had for the playoffs was probably Brandon Moss, and I don't remember if he was in the lineup for those playoffs if they got there, when he was even with the organization.
I don't think they got to the playoffs.
I don't think they did either, but that's what his role would have been. Would have been that perfect guy that you could hit sixth. And you mentioned Kyle Schwarber, and I thought I remembered this correctly, so I went back and I looked just to make sure. We all remember the playoff series back in 2015 where he hit the moon shot that's like encased on the scoreboard in Wrigley Field. Yeah, you know where Schwarber was hitting? Wasn't leadoff, because they had leadoff hitters then. He was in the sixth spot. The pure left-handed bat that can go against a right-handed pitcher that can change the baseball game with one swing of the bat, and that's where he hit was six during that playoff run. He ends up molding into a leadoff hitter. If Gorman hits six his whole time here in St. Louis, that's exactly where he should be, because he can be the power-hitting left-handed bat that, sure, he is going to strike out a lot, but he could come up in a big spot in a playoff game or in a regular season game and can change the outcome of the game with one swing of the bat.
If you could just get this consistently from him, I mean, teams don't know how to navigate through this lineup then, because if Goldie and Arenado are hitting, you already have that detriment to deal with. You've got the guys that are getting on base in the leadoff spot, and then when you think you could breathe, it's what Gossman said at the beginning of the season last year after that Toronto series. You really have no chance to catch your breath against this team. Even if Mason Wynn is hitting in the 9 or the 8 hole, and you've got Ciani in the 9 spot, if Gorman's this, teams don't know how to navigate through it.
Yeah, you look at what the teams that have won the World Series over the last 5 years, left-handed power presence in their lineup. Now, there's one name that is in this twice, but Corey Seager, 33 home runs as a lefty last year for Texas. Yordan Alvarez. Now, he's a much better hitter all around. I understand
same
that.
with Seager.
Sure. But Yordan Alvarez, left-handed power bat for the Houston Astros, 37 home runs the year that the Astros won it. Freddie Freeman, 31 home runs. Again, better all-around hitter, but left-handed power is what we're talking about here. 31 home runs for the Atlanta Braves when they won it. Corey Seager, again, 2020, in 60 games, hit 15 home runs for the Dodgers.
World Series didn't count.
Juan Soto for the Nationals, 34 home runs as a left-handed power bat. And these guys dominated not just in the regular season, but in the playoffs. We talked about this last year with, who was it? The ESPN writer, Jesse Rogers. He had that big story leading into the playoffs of how left-handed hitters do not see a downgrade in their OPS in the playoffs. Right-handed hitters do. you see a massive downgrade from what they were during the regular season to where they were in the playoffs for right-handed hitters. And that same downgrade doesn't necessarily exist for lefties. Gorman could be this guy. All of the last 5 World Series winners had a left-handed 30 home run bat in their lineup. That is something the Cardinals have been severely lacking in recent seasons. The only left-handed hitters that had at least 30 home runs for the Cardinals over the last 20 seasons, Alex. Jim Edmonds, he did it 4 times. Matt Carpenter in 2018. End of list. End of list. They now have that player as part of their core group, not just for 2024, but moving forward. And this is why we talked during the offseason about how hard it would be to trade Gorman specifically. Trading Donovan, trading Nootbaar, trading those guys, trading Burleson, it would suck. Especially Donovan to me, because he's a guy that he is one of the leaders of the club right now. But you've got guys that have similar skill sets in Donovan and Nootbaar especially. Gorman has a skill set that you don't have, that honestly most of Major League Baseball is struggling to produce through the minor leagues. And so you have that, and it's really hard to give that up for anything, including a front-end starting pitcher. My question to you, Alex, off of this, because I think Gorman has worked his way into this category of being a core Cardinal for the future. Barring something unforeseen, if an ace gets offered on the table, you got to at least listen to that if you're the Cardinals. But I think he's a core member of the position players moving forward. Who else would you guys have as a part of that right now? For the next 5 years, if I said your core Cardinals group of position players is what? Who would be on that list for you?
Brendan Donovan, Mason Wynn, Alec Burleson, Jordan Walker, and Wilson Contreras.
Yeah, I think that's probably the list for me.
I think the Cardinals would tell you Lars Nootbaar. I wouldn't put him on that.
So let's go through this slowly. So go through that again.
So I'd go Brendan Donovan. I think he's my core, whether you want to call him an outfielder, utility guy.
Agreed.
Jordan Walker, core right fielder.
Absolutely.
Alec Burleson, core first baseman. Mason Wynn, core shortstop. Wilson Contreras, core catcher.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. And Nolan Gorman. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's the list for me. And I think you're right. I think the Cardinals would tell you Nootbaar's on that list. The only reason I wouldn't put Nootbaar on that list is going back a couple segments ago to our conversation about Jordan Walker, and I said I think he's probably a 250 hitter. If you think he's going to hit what BK thought, which was 280, going to have a pretty good on base while also hitting 30 home run power potentially when he gets to his prime years and really matures into his body, makes Nootbaar expendable. Because now you've got a guy in Jordan Walker that can be the on-base and the slug and be more of the balanced hitter that we're talking about that you really need. Now, I understand he's not from the left side, but you need one of those bats to be that. So you'd have Jordan Walker take that role. You've got Donovan that represents the on-base, and then you've got Nolan Gorman that represents the slug. It makes Nootbaar a more, in my opinion, expendable piece to go out there and try and acquire that number 2, or who knows, depending what year it is, maybe the ace that the Cardinals are looking for.
And it also, I think Nootbaar becomes expendable if Mason Wynn is a top of the lineup hitter, like he has been right now. I don't need Nootbaar in that spot, and we've already talked about Gorman being a 6-hole hitter. The other guy that we didn't put into this is Ivan Herrera, and I think Ivan Herrera could be that trade chip that could get you a number 2.
I was about to say, I feel like Contreras could be a slash with Herrera. One of those two, I think, has to be a core member of your future. I don't know which one it will ultimately be. I think it's probably Contreras given the money, but I think one of those guys would be a part of that. But the fact that you have 6 core position players to build around for the future, pretty damn impressive, man. And the fact that we're talking about Nootbaar right now is maybe potentially being a part of that as well. That's everything that they could have asked for and then some when it came to them developing these guys. It's why I was so optimistic about the lineup coming into the season, is because you saw this and you could see, okay, if this comes together, what we're witnessing over the last 3 weeks, this is what it should look like. It's when you look at what the Reds are right now, that's the concern, is what if that is right around the horizon? Could you then become that?
And this is what I was just about to bring up, and I'm glad you mentioned the Reds. The one thing that I fear with that core that we've just listed there, because you said that was 7 players that's there on that core. I don't know if any of those guys are middle of the order bats. And I know like Contreras is that now, but if you're putting Contreras / Herrera, because Contreras' deal will run out by the time you get to this 5-year mark, I don't know if there's a middle of the order bat there. Because as much as I love Gorman's power, he's best suited in the 5 or 6 spot to where he's not in that position of if runners are on, you need him to get a base hit to drive in a run. He's more of like if runners are on, I can hit a 3-run bomb. You don't really have that unless Walker becomes it.
And that's why I think you need seasoning for Walker.
Exactly. But even then, that's only one. Like, I don't know, for as much as we do talk about this core, I don't know if there's a middle-of-the-order bat that is there outside of Jordan Walker. And that is one thing that is a little, I don't want to say alarming because I'm not overly concerned about it, but it is something to keep an eye on, in my opinion, is there doesn't feel like a middle-of-the-order bat. And I think that's what the Reds are running into.
You know what it feels like?
It can be Contreras, by the way.
It can be, but my thing is I don't know if he's the catcher of the future in 3 years potentially.
Sure.
And if he's not,
maybe you develop
is?
somebody like 3 years ago. Jordan Walker was in his first year in the Cardinals system, and we didn't know that he was going to be eventually a big piece of what. Like they could draft somebody this year at number 7 overall or whatever it is that they're selecting, and that guy 2 years from now is now the cleanup hitter that we're talking about. So that's why it's a little tough for me to like go too far down the road. If we're just talking, hey, what's the future of the Cardinals lineup look like? It could be something like Wynn leading off, Donovan or Nootbaar batting second, Walker 3, Contreras 4, Burleson 5, and Gorman 6. I could see that, and that could be a really good lineup. Like, you could see how that ends up being. I don't think you're necessarily lacking in the middle of the order as long as Walker becomes the player that you
run through that lineup again for me.
Wynn, Donovan / Nootbaar, Walker, Contreras, Burleson.
Yeah, to me, that's a
sixth
lineup that I'm not necessarily scared of.
Right now. But if Walker becomes the player that you were describing earlier
even then,
today,
I'm not scared of that lineup because I think that's a bunch of complementary pieces surrounding one middle-of-the-order hitter.
If Walker becomes a 25 to 30 home run hitter and Contreras already is that, batting 270 for both of them, I don't know what more you could really ask for.
I think you need somebody to emerge like an MVP candidate.
Yeah,
profiles like an MVP candidate, and I mean Walker would have to get to that for you because I don't think Wilson Contreras will ever be an MVP candidate.
Yeah,
and it feels a lot like what the Cardinals did when they got Goldie and Arenado. They were searching for those middle of the order bats because they had all the other complementary pieces, but they were like, we need middle of the order bats, and you got them.
I mean, like 2 weeks ago, we were talking, not 2 weeks ago, 2 months ago, we were talking about Jordan Walker as being that guy, and now we're just out. Like, we don't think he can be a 3-hole hitter now?
I'm not.
He can be a 3-hole hitter, but T-Bone's saying he's
out.
not scared of it, and I think you have to be an MVP candidate to what T-Bone's talking about.
I don't want to come off as I'm completely out on Walker, but there are alarming signs going on with Jordan Walker that I can't sit here today and completely be all in on, like, will he be a 30 home run hitter and a 3-hole hitter for the Cardinals in the future?
Yeah, I don't know, but like what I'm saying is if he becomes what they think 3 years from now, that lineup could be really good, or 2 years from now, next year, hell, that lineup could be really good. I think sometimes we overstate how great every lineup is across Major League Baseball because we're just thinking about 3 lineups. Like we're thinking about Philly, Atlanta, and the Dodgers. And yes, that's what you're going up against, but this is why you have to be a well-rounded team and get some serious luck once you get to the playoffs. Like you could catch fire and you have the depth that a lot of teams across Major League Baseball would aspire to have with the guys that I just mentioned there. Maybe I'm just higher still on Jordan Walker's upside. That's probably what this conversation is really getting from us is I still think Walker can be that guy 2 years from now when he's 24 years old. I don't think we've seen anything approaching his ceiling right now. Coming up in about 15 minutes, by the way, earlier I mentioned the stat on Nolan Gorman having 10 home runs. I might not have mentioned this. I should have, but the qualifier there, he's second in Major League Baseball for players his age or younger that are left-handed. It's like that is an important qualifier. I wasn't saying he's got more home runs than Kyle Schwarber. Yeah, you can look that up super easy. Obviously, that's not the case. Gorman is one of the best young left-handed power bats in all of Major League Baseball. That's what I was trying to get out there. Coming up next, T-Bone's big mad at Coleman Hawkins. He'll explain why here on 101 ESPN. So Coleman Hawkins declared for the NBA draft. You may know him as the guy that T-Bone hated for a few years as he was a forward for the Illinois Fighting Illini. And then this year, T-Bone came around to loving most of what he saw out of Coleman Hawkins. He was a big-time player for him. He performed at the exact level that they were expecting. Versatile defender, a really good point forward type of player for them at times this year. Overall, kind of came into his own as a player. Well, he declares for the NBA draft and says, I'm going to also put my name into the transfer portal just in case, because I need to have all of my options available for me. And then he went on Twitter and was like, hey, Illini fans, stop freaking out. I'm not transferring. I am committed to the NBA draft. Well, yesterday was the deadline
first thought
to declare for the NBA draft or to drop out of the draft and remain eligible for college basketball. And Coleman Hawkins decided, I'm going to remain eligible for college basketball. And then, soon thereafter, it was announced Coleman Hawkins is planning to transfer to a new program and, quote, is expected to be among the highest paid NIL college basketball players and will use his final year of eligibility for development, end quote.
Smart.
Traitor.
Now, T-Bone is very upset about this, as
this.
you can probably imagine, because Coleman Hawkins, in his mind, is a liar.
He is a liar.
T-Bone, why are you mad at your guy, man?
Because
why are you mad?
I knew he wasn't going to get drafted because he was a projected late second-round pick, and he's just too indecisive and not explosive enough for the NBA. So I could have told you he was going to go undrafted. The part of him telling Illini fans of, hey, relax, just because my name's in the portal, I could come back. And my first thought was, okay, he could do what Kofi did. Kofi did that. He declared for the draft. And just like Coleman Hawkins was like, oh, crap, I'm not going to get drafted. But then he came back to Illinois. Coleman Hawkins, meanwhile, lied to the Illini's face and is going to transfer somewhere else. Now, as frustrated as I am, as frustrated as I am with Coleman Hawkins, I do think it is good for him to go to another program. Now, I don't know if he's going to have the same success that he did at Illinois last year. In fact, I would be shocked if he did. But I do think it is good for him to go to another program because he would be the number one guy for the Illini next year.
M-I-Z-Z-O-U.
You can have him. But
I would take him in a heartbeat.
Did you
know
watch
quickly
games
I would
last year?
sign up to have Coleman Hawkins as a big man at Mizzou? Oh,
Those games were crap last
He'd be
year.
perfect
For you
in that
guys, it looked
Kobe
like
Brown
Michael
role.
Jordan.
Dude, we just need to send him film of Kobe Brown before we got Dennis Gates at Mizzou and after we got Dennis Gates at Mizzou, and then show him the film of Kobe Brown playing this year, briefly, for the LA Clippers. Oh, yeah. That's the guy we need. That is the player that we need at the University of Missouri.
I frankly hope he goes to a Big Ten team just to shove it up your you-know-what.
Yeah, man.
But I do think it is best for him not to come back to the Illini because he cannot be a number one option. And you saw that this year. He kind of molded into being like the number 3 in the offense to being more of the number 1 defender, where you had Domask be the number 1 guy for them and to try and lead the offense. But he can't be a number 1. If he was brought back, that's what the expectation would be from fans. I think that's what the Illini would hope from him. So I do think it is best for him, both sides, to kind of separate from this, because I think Underwood built the roster around, hey, we're not going to plan on him being back because we're not going to wait around. We need to get going on our offseason. And for Coleman Hawkins, it is a chance to, go make some really good money in NIL, so good for him. But also the fact of the matter that he's now going to go to a different situation where maybe there will be pressure on him, but I think if he goes to the right spot, it can work for him. He just can't be a number 1 guy.
So he's from Sacramento, so you got to wonder maybe he goes closer to home. He goes out west and plays somewhere there. But this has the feel of Kentucky written all over it, man. They got a new coach in. They're trying to kind of get this thing back on track. NIL is a big-time boon right now. You could also see him maybe going to Arkansas. Arkansas would make some sense with Cal now being in charge. They have a crazy big NIL fund that's available to them. I could see one of those two teams maybe getting involved in something like this. This is all speculation, but it would make a lot of sense given where those programs are at and the type of player that Coleman Hawkins is. You're right, T-Bone. He's not a number 1 option, especially offensively. He's a guy that you come in and expect 10 to 15 points per game out of. And if he gives you a lot defensively as a versatile defender and he distributes it well, you feel really good about that. That's a nice player to have as a number 2 or number 3 option offensively. And some games he'll give you 20, most games 10 to 15 points. This is also why I like NIL in college basketball, though. Not because he's leaving, not because he's going elsewhere from Illinois, but because I think guys like Coleman Hawkins just would have stayed in the NBA draft 10 years ago. He wouldn't be coming back to college basketball. And it's better for the sport to have more Coleman Hawkins remaining in college basketball. It's better for the players. It's better for the sport. It's better for us as fans to have guys like this that we know their names. We recognize them from NCAA tournament runs, to be able to have them in the college game for longer. It's also better for their development. Like, what's going to be better for him? Going and playing in the G League for the next 4 seasons and just wasting away down there, or having another year of college eligibility and playing at a big-time program, potentially making a Final Four run, and maybe developing his game there against some other top-level athletes? I think the latter, personally. I really do believe that. So I think this ends up being a really good thing for the players, for the fans, for everybody involved. It just sucks for Illinois fans that he's going to be transferring.
Yeah, good riddance. I don't want him anymore.
I think it creates more rivalries, which is even better.
Does it change your opinion of like the lasting opinion of Hawkins if he didn't transfer? If that was it and he goes to the NBA draft, you would have remembered him pretty fondly from last year, right?
Yeah, probably, because he would have been one of the big 3 that I think will be remembered in Illinois lore, probably, because that's one of the
from this era.
Yeah, because this is one of the best teams since the 2010s. It's not as good as the team that had like Darren Williams that got to the Final Four, but he would have been with him, Domask, and Terrence Shannon would have been remembered in Illini lore for basketball.
What does this do for that? Does it change, in your opinion? Like, and you don't speak for all Illinois fans. I understand that. There's probably some Illini fans that are just always going to remember it fondly because he was there for 4 years, and that's a long time now in college basketball for a guy to develop within the program and then become one of the faces of a team that went on a run. But when you remember him now, and he's in an Indiana uniform, for example, or Michigan.
We can scrub him from the team photo.
Is that going to change the way that he's remembered by Illinois fans, do you think?
I think it will. And the reason I say I think it will is because there were a lot of frustrations with Hawkins before last year of inconsistent play. I became frustrated with kind of he's one of those players that when he's on your team and you're winning, you can deal with like his attitude or his charisma that's on the court. But when it's not going well and he is struggling and he's doing that, it becomes frustrating. So the years prior to last year were, in my opinion, frustrating as an Illini fan. I don't know if all Illini fans feel that way, but it was for me as I screamed at the mountaintops for multiple seasons in a row. Last year, it finally was like, okay, he has finally found his role. And then for him to kind of, tell Illini fans, don't worry, I'm not going to leave. If I do have to come back, I will come back. And then he enters the portal and is more than likely going to go elsewhere. I think it does hurt the case for him, as I still think he'll be remembered fondly by some, but I do think it's not as much as like Domask and Shannon. I think he now will become a forgotten member of that team.
Interesting. Last thing that I wanted to get to, college related. This is not on the basketball side. It's on the football side of things. The SEC going through wholesale changes, as you'd expect. Texas and Oklahoma coming in. They're going to be a part of the conference now. And one of the questions long term is, okay, what does that mean for scheduling? Right now, they're just kind of keeping it the same. There's some differences, of course, in terms of the way that they're scheduling, but it's still 8 conference games this season for the SEC. It sounds like they're probably going to be moving towards a 9-conference slate sooner rather than later. Alex, T-Bone, I'm curious, do you guys like this? Do you prefer an extra conference game put in there for SEC teams? This is what the Big Ten does, so it's not like a crazy move by the conference, but it is different than what they've done previously. Right now, Mizzou, for example, will play Murray State, Buffalo, Boston College, and UMass next season.
Yeah,
you'll have
UMass.
to remove one of those games. Yeah,
So I do like that.
Yeah.
I do like that. Like, I'm looking at their schedule now. Like, the fact that UMass is in between 2 SEC games and then the rest of the SEC schedule, just take that UMass game out and put another SEC game in there. I think it creates more excitement throughout the season. I don't need a UMass versus Mizzou game in October.
Yeah, and because teams are so scared to schedule really good non-conference games, I just add a conference game. Basically tell them, no, you're going to end up with one.
You're artificially boosting your win total by having those games, though. Yeah. This will change that. Like, now fans are going to have to change expectations going into a season. What used to be a 9-win season, that's pretty good. Now that looks like an 8-win season for a lot of programs across America. So that's something that will take some adjusting to.
As an Illini fan, I can tell you the 9-game conference schedule is not good for the football program, but it makes for better football.
Well, that's just your football program.
Sure.
It is better football for the Power 4 conferences. Now you don't have you have one less game of the UMass, or you've got like the Bama versus Mercer game. Like you have one less of those, which are, let's just call it what they are. They are pointless football games.
Yeah,
like they don't matter. Exactly. So I do like this better, to where you move to a 9-game conference slate, and especially because you added 2 legitimately good programs for the SEC in Texas and Oklahoma. Yeah, I think this is best for the conference.
I think especially when their playoffs are going to be expanding, it makes it easier to identify the dominant teams when you have more conference games, because you're going up against the same teams that you're competing against, rather than trying to identify, well, they picked up the victory against UMass. What does that do for their power schedule?
They probably lost. It doesn't matter.
Oh, that's true. Touche.
I think Mizzou is going to make out well with this. I will be curious to see with, like, if you're Vanderbilt. Dude.
Vanderbilt
How are you
probably
getting to
saw this.
6? How are you ever going to make it to another bowl game again? That's where it gets really tough for some
They
of these
should
schools.
celebrate advantage. They should be like, yeah, now we got a 1-in-9 chance to win a conference game.
And it's less opportunity for another, like, money donor game where a team will pay to.
Exactly.
This is brutal, man. Absolutely brutal. All right, he's Alex. That's T-Bone. I'm BK. Coming up next, if the Cardinals make a Diamondbacks-like run in the postseason this year, what would their trump card be? What would the thing be that we look back at the way that we do with the Diamondbacks, with their front 3 guys in the rotation and their athleticism defensively and base stealing? What would be the Cardinals versions of that? We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN. I'm talking to all of the men out there right now. It is time to unlock your inner champion. Are you going to the gym and you're just not getting the same results? Reduced muscle mass, reduced strength. You don't feel quite like yourself. Some days you wake up and you got some mood swings. You have an increase in the body fat and you're kind of tired. Well, that might be due to low testosterone. That's possible. Those are some of the side effects of low testosterone. You get into your mid-30s and suddenly the testosterone levels for some guys start to decrease. There's a number of reasons as to why. And over at Victory Men's Health, they can help you out. They have 4 great locations across the St. Louis area. You can go to any of those or check them out today. VictoryMen'sHealth.com is the place where you can go. They can get you all set up with your first visit. You go over there. It's an easy way to do it. You book now up on the website, top right corner of that. You'll put in your name, information, and they'll give you a call that day. It's super easy. It's Victory Men's Health, and it's VictoryMen'sHealth.com.
Terry Hendricks Near They Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Cardinals beat the Reds yesterday 5-3. They take 2 of 3 from the Cincinnati Reds. They are off today. They'll be back in action tomorrow night when they start a 3-game set at the Philadelphia Phillies. 5:40 will be first pitch. Miles Michaelis is on the mound for St. Louis. Aaron Nola will get the start for the Philadelphia Phillies. And tonight here on 101 ESPN, we got the Eastern Conference Finals for you in the NHL Stanley Cup playoffs. Game 5 between the New York Rangers and the Florida Panthers. While pregame coverage starting at 6:30. The Sports Update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
With Alex and T-Bone on BK. So yesterday we had Jim Bowden on the show, and T-Bone, I didn't put on the rundown. This is a bad job by me. Can you grab the cut from Jim Bowden?
Come on, T-Bone.
I said it was me. I threw myself under the bus. Jim Bowden was talking with us, Alex, about why he doesn't view the Cardinals as a playoff contender. And he made that abundantly clear. Not once, not twice, not 3 times, but 4 or 5, maybe 6 times over the course of the interview. But I asked him as one of the follow-ups, I said, okay, I get that you don't think the Cardinals are a playoff contender. I understand that. But this time last year, we would have said something very similarly about the Arizona Diamondbacks. So I said, Jim, how do you explain that? Like the difference of, hey, the Diamondbacks weren't a contender at this point, and then they went to the World Series. What's so different about the Cardinals from that team? Here's what he had to say.
The Diamondbacks had an elite defensive team, right? Top 2 in the league. They had an elite base running team, top 2 in the league. They had 3 elite starting pitchers and a strong back end. So when you get to the postseason and you're sitting there and you have starting pitching, you got the bullpen, elite defense, you can manufacture runs. That's the formula that runs the table in October.
All right. So I agree with everything he said there. I also think some of it is revisionist history in terms of looking at the team, what they were during the regular season, and really remembering what they did in the postseason. Guys, Brandon Pfaadt had a 5.7 ERA during the regular season last year. 5.7. Down the stretch, he looked a little bit better, and then he carried that into the postseason where he was awesome, absolutely spectacular, and he's been that guy basically all of this year. Have you guys looked at what just happened there?
Apparently puberty.
Have you guys looked at what their offense was from a year ago, though, during the regular season?
Tell me about it, BK.
They had 4 guys hit 20 or more home runs. Next best on the team was Evan Longoria with 11.
Oh, jeez.
They had no
like
lineup
40.
depth whatsoever. Now, it's true. They were defensively amazing. And if you look at what they were able to do on the bases, like Corbin Carroll stole 54 bases last year. Jake McCarthy, 26. They had a lot of dudes that were a menace once they got onto the base paths. So they had some stuff that they could do to manufacture runs. That's their story, though. The Cardinals story will obviously look a lot different if they become this year what the Diamondbacks were last year. I'm not telling you they will, but I want to have this conversation, Alex, about what it would look like if this Cardinals team does find a way to go on a little bit of a run. In your opinion, what would their trump cards be? What do they have that has the potential to be elite, the way that the Diamondbacks eventually had an elite front 3 in their rotation, elite level defense, elite level base running? What do you think those things would be for the Cardinals in 2024 if they're able to do it?
Yeah, a big if. There's 2 for me that would be the lay it down and say, this is why. It's your elite bullpen, whether it's a big 3, big 4, but an elite bullpen that is just unable to pick up runs against, and an elite offense. And what I mean by an elite offense is from top to bottom, pitchers don't know how to handle it. I think when an elite offense, I think Philadelphia. Not so much of just those 2 or 3 big guys. It's you don't know how to survive the depth of that lineup. If the Cardinals are coming through with
You mean kind of like the
victories,
2013 Cardinals, for example?
I'd say kind of like the 2004 Cardinals, probably, with that offense. Just top to bottom, right, BK? Those are the 2 that if we're looking back and talking about a World Series appearance, those are the 2 reasons why. It's your bullpen was lights out from start to finish, and your lineup was dominant from 1 through 9.
It's funny because, like, I do like the lineup in theory when it all clicks together, but I don't know if it's, like, a deep lineup that can change the game with one swing of the bat. You know, that's what I think of, like, when I think of the Phillies or the Braves. Gorman and who? Like, Goldie?
I said Gorman.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
Sounds like the 2004 lineup to me.
Yeah, no,
Again,
not close.
we have to stop bringing up 2004 because it's not similar at all to 2004.
I don't know, man. You liked it.
No, I literally have never once commented to that. 2013 is the lineup that I do think there are a lot of similarities to, though, guys. Like, I don't know if they'll get there, but you look back at that lineup, and it wasn't a bunch of boppers. The only guys in their lineup that had 20 or more home runs were Matt Holliday at 22, played 140 games that year, and Carlos Beltran with 24. Everybody else was in that 10 to 15 home run range for the most part. It was not a bopper type of a lineup. It was a lot of dudes hitting a lot of doubles and a lot of guys that hit for a pretty good average that season. Everybody almost in that lineup was like a slightly above league average hitter. And I do think that's the similarity with the 2024 version of the Cardinals offense.
What were they with runners in scoring position?
They're really good.
This team's not.
Yeah.
Well, they haven't been hitting for the most part this season. They have been great with runners in scoring position over the last 3 weeks.
Maybe it's just stuck in my mind because I've seen, like, what the Phillies lineup looks like when it is going good. And it is like, you've got 5 guys that, like, can hit a home run at any moment. And I just don't feel that way about the Cardinals lineup now. And I don't think this lineup with this version of Goldie and Arenado will get to that point this year. So I don't think the lineup is going to be the reason why you look at them and say that's their trump card. I think it'd be their bullpen. I think they are a team that if they get to the playoffs, outside of Sonny Gray's start, and this could change if they make a massive addition, but right now, with the roster constructed, they're going to have to be bullpen heavy and really cut games down with their starters and really go to that pen early on. And they probably need to still even add a bullpen arm to this mix because I'm not sure if you're going to see Keenan Middleton this season.
And that's the part for me where it's hard to imagine because they're going to have to be elite throughout the regular season to get you to the playoffs. That are they going to be worn down to where they're not elite for you? Because the luxury that other teams have is their rotation can carry a bulk of that regular season, and the bullpen is rested and ready to go in the postseason.
So I agree with what you just said there, but the reason I think the Cardinals are positioned well is because I think they've got a regular season rotation. We talked about this yesterday. Though it's not sexy, like they're like bottom 10 in team ERA, like Gibson, Lynn, maybe Pallante if he ends up pitching well, Michaelis if he's figured things out, Sonny Gray, like you're starting to see like, okay, I can write down when Gibson starts. You're going to get 6 innings and it's probably going to be a quality start, and that's enough for the offense to win.
Yeah.
I just don't know if Gibson stuff plays in the postseason to where then you really have to shorten games, and if your starters, in theory, can keep games close and the offense can hopefully open up some leads, you can start to really keep the bullpen fresh throughout the regular season. Yeah. So I can see how this rotation can help keep the bullpen fresh in theory, but I think if they're going to have a trump card in the postseason, it's going to be their bullpen.
I think so, too. I do think the lineup can be part of it because I don't think you can win in the postseason with just one thing. I think you need multiple ways to win. Like, if the Cardinals exclusively just have a dominant bullpen, well, how are you scoring your runs? You know, and it's why probably, T-Bone, you're lower on the Cardinals right now than I am, is because you're looking at it and you're like, yeah, exactly, BK. If you just have a dominant bullpen, how are you winning when you get there? And my retort would be, I do think they have the offense to be able to do that. I think we're underestimating, I mean, we've seen it over the last 3 weeks now, what the Cardinals can do. And I don't want to hear about the opposing teams that they're going up against. Yeah, they didn't go up against a great one necessarily this week, but previously they did. They've gone up against some really good opponents during this stretch of baseball, and the offense has still been excellent in those games as well. So I think between the contacts that you have with Mason Wynn and Alec Burleson, the on-base percentage that you're able to get from Brendan Donovan and Lars Nootbaar, the all-around hitter that you hopefully will have back at some point this year with Wilson Contreras, and the potential that Goldie can also be that guy for you, and then you add in the power from Nolan Gorman, I think that looks like a lineup that can win in October. They've got to keep doing it. It can't just be a 3-week stretch, but to me, if this team goes on a run, and it's a huge if, it will be because their lineup was excellent, deep 1 through 8, basically, and they had a bullpen that was able to lock games down at the back end, and a rotation that kept them healthy throughout the course of the season.
I think that's the only way you're doing it, is to have the offense be there, and that's why I'm still skeptical, because 3 weeks is different than 3 months. If I get an elongated stretch of this with the team, I could look at it and be like, I don't know how they're going to survive this, but it's still in that area where it's like, yeah, is this a hot streak or is this real? But I do believe, like, bullpens will go up and down. Your offense is going to have to be from top to bottom unstoppable for you to be in this position.
So the other thing to keep in mind, part of this is a just get in mentality. I know nobody wants to hear it. I don't blame you. I'm not blaming you at all. I want to say that up front. But the Cardinals are pretty close to just getting in terms of like where they are right now in the standings. The Padres currently have the last wild card in the National League. They're tied with the Giants. Those two teams are tied for the last wild card, one game above 500. The Cardinals are tied with the Cubs, a half game back of those teams because they're at 500 right now. The National League stinks, guys. It is so bad. The Giants, the Cubs, the Padres, the Cardinals, you could even, to a degree, throw the Pirates into this mix. They're different versions of the same team. Like, their overall ratings in MLB The Show would all be like 80 overall. They're fine. They're okay. They're solid. They do certain things well, all of them. But ultimately, none of them will be viewed as World Series contenders when we get to the playoffs. And it shouldn't surprise anybody, not a single one of us, if one of those teams is playing in the World Series this year, because that's the way that the baseball playoffs work. I'm not telling you got to like it, but the baseball playoffs, to a large degree, are becoming what hockey is, right, where you don't know. You don't know who's going to end up getting into the Stanley Cup Finals. It's what makes it special. And baseball, a team emerges, and you're like, wait, that's not who I thought was. The Dodgers haven't made it in any full season in recent years. Like, what? The 2021 Braves got there last year. The Diamondbacks get in. Like, it's weird stuff happens in the playoffs, and that's part of what is also influencing my thoughts here is the Cardinals can absolutely get in because the National League is so weak, and then when you get in, that's when you get
need to rely on weird stuff.
Yeah. Listen to these run differentials for the 3 wild card teams and the 2 that are chasing.
This is sad.
Well, first, let me give you the American League. Plus 69, plus 81, plus 2, plus 24, neutral. That's the American League.
That's good baseball.
Here's the National League. Plus 40, minus 19, plus 5, minus 8, minus 35.
The one outlier there, of course, is the Braves, who are actually good.
Yeah.
The Braves, the Phillies, and the Dodgers are good baseball teams. Everybody else, all the 12 other teams in the National League are not good. They're not. But 2 others are going to get into the playoffs.
God, this feels like the Western Conference from last year. In hockey.
Yeah.
Where it was like, dude, there's like the Eastern Conference. There were 2 teams that were fighting for the wild card that were like minus 30 in goal differential. That's what this National League is going to be.
BK really trying to put lipstick on this pig. I'm not. I feel like I'm being open and honest with you guys about how I feel about the Cardinals. I think they're a fine baseball team. They're fine. And that's good enough this year to get into the playoffs.
Yeah.
That's it. Like that's
you're the pig.
That's where we're at.
We're bacon.
If you don't like that, I get it, man. I don't blame you. I think this was the logical endpoint when Major League Baseball put this extra wild card team in. We all knew where this was headed. Teams are going to be in a race to the middle. Nobody's going to try to construct a team that can get through October. They're going to construct teams that get to the trade deadline. And if you're still in it at the deadline, some teams will see that as, time for us to make a run for it. Let's go make a big deal. And other teams that are in that same area will be like, I don't think our teams are very good right now. Let's stand pat. Let's see if we can get into the playoffs, get that extra revenue, but we're not going to make a big move. We'll see where the Cardinals go with it. I think we know which side they're probably going to be on there, but that's
I feel like that second one.
That's how they're constructed.
Who doesn't like pork, man? Everybody loves pork. Except vegan over here.
I'm not that big a fan of pork either, and I'm not even
really?
Vegan. Yeah.
Really?
Not a pork steak guy?
My cousin says pork's a dirty meat, and he won't eat it. And I said, man, you're crazy. I'm having pork steaks tonight.
Good for you.
Or Cardinals, if we're going to call it that.
Yeah, that's basically what you're eating.
Do you like pork steaks?
Love pork steaks.
Not a big pork steak guy, as you could probably imagine.
Well, you're not a meat guy.
You were having like mushroom
I know, but
nuggets
generally
yesterday.
speaking, this is not a popular. They were nuggets. They were
Imagine going over. Imagine being invited over for dinner to BK's and be like, "Oh man, I'm looking forward to this."
I wouldn't do that.
What are you having? We're having mushroom nuggets.
We would
BK's
go.
the guy that waits to tell you what it is until you take the first
We're
bite.
having almond milk with mushroom
we do
nuggets.
Oat milk, man. Not almond milk. Oat milk's good.
You squeeze the milk out of the oats yourself?
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with oat milk. You guys don't. You don't.
No, man. No, drink the normal
Starbucks,
milk.
You don't get oat milk.
No.
Oh.
No, man. Drink the normal milk.
Cookie crumble. Okay?
With milk. With real milk.
Yeah.
Talk to Katie about buying a cow and putting it in my backyard. It's just
Kara brought up getting chickens the other day.
Dude, I brought it up too.
Can you relax?
I told Katie.
We're not going to have a chicken farm in our backyard in St. Charles.
I know a lot of people back in my hometown.
I can do it in my home. I can do it in my home. All I got to do is just get a little area.
The chicken coop?
Yeah. I talked about getting goats to landscape my backyard. Like,
Now that I would be in for right now.
dude, I looked it up. First of all, it is expensive to goat landscape, but boy, does it work.
Coming up next, let's dive into the junk drawer here on
just did
101 ESPN. All right, let's dive into the junk drawer. T-Bone's got a story for us today. What do you got, my man?
Yeah, guys, I saw, we've talked a lot during the junk drawer about some really dumb criminals, where it is they commit a crime, but then they're not very smart of how to get away with it. Well, this is kind of to that effect, to an extent. But what this is not a very bright person that had their court hearing, and they had it via Zoom, and it was someone that had a suspended driver's license. And I'm just going to let the audio tell the rest of the story as to how this played out yesterday in court.
Mr. Harris, are you driving?
Actually, I'm pulling into my doctor's office, actually. So just give me 1 second. I'm parking right now.
You stationary? All right. What are we doing? So maybe I don't understand something. This is a driver with a license suspended?
That is correct, Your Honor.
And he was just driving, and he didn't have a license.
Wait for it.
No, I'm looking at his record. He doesn't have a license. He's suspended, and he's just driving. I don't even know why he would do that. So defendant's bond is revoked in this matter. Defendant is to turn himself into the Washington County Jail by 6 p.m. today. Failure to turn himself in will result in a bench warrant with no bond.
I couldn't believe I saw this.
I wish the judge would have ended it with, why don't you drive yourself with no license over to the county jail because you're going to it?
So the very beginning is the best part, where he says, are you driving? No, I'm turning it in. I'm parking right now at the doctor's office. So you were driving. What is this case for? This is a suspended license, right?
The lawyer, yes, Your Honor.
Yeah, that's right. That is correct. The lawyer has to be like,
yeah. Oh, you lawyer's
idiot.
thinking he's an idiot.
The best part is, and I cut it out because it's like a 1.5 to 2 minute long clip that I saw on social media, is at one point during this awkward exchange, the defense attorney goes, we'd like to suspend the court for a couple of weeks. And the judge is just like, no, what are you talking about? I just saw him driving.
Wait, is he on FaceTime or is this a
Zoom?
phone
It's
call?
a Zoom. It's a Zoom court.
Because he's got his sunglasses on. He's got one hand on the wheel, leaning and holding the phone with his other hand. It's amazing.
Wasn't this gentleman's best moment?
The look on that judge's face was, why am I doing this? This is a waste of my damn time. Got to be smarter than that, man. When he says, are you driving? No, somebody else is driving.
Meanwhile, you
sitting
can
in
see
the
the steering wheel.
That's not me.
I'm just practicing for when I get it
Sorry,
back.
I had to turn the phone around. I was pointing it towards my friend. He's driving me.
Some things are a stupid test. Like previously, when you were an NFL player, you were a hopeful NFL player, you go to the NFL Combine, and you failed the drug test. You didn't actually fail the drug test. You failed the stupid test because you know that drug test is coming. Normally, they're randomly selected, right? Over the course of a season, if you are somebody that used to partake in marijuana, like you didn't know when they were going to test you over the course of the NFL season. Could be any point over a 4-month stretch. But you know the one time that they will, it's at the NFL Combine. It happens every year. It's not something new. Your agent has prepared you. Like, you know that's coming. And so for the players that failed that drug test at the NFL Combine, you failed the stupid test. You just got to stop smoking for 2 months. Right afterwards, you can start again, and then you stop a month before the NFL season. You should be fine.
Isn't that Laramie Tunsil who tweeted out a picture of himself with the gas mask on?
He didn't tweet it, but yeah, there was a video of him or picture of him with the gas mask on before the NFL
literally
draft.
the day before the draft.
Day of. It was that night.
The day of. That's what it was.
That night. But that's not as bad. Failing a drug test at the Combine, that's stupid. This guy failed the stupid test. He had his bail revoked because he failed the stupid test. All you got to do is just not be driving.
And you could hear it at the end of the video that he realized that I just failed the stupid. Oh, God.
My God, man. All right, coming up in 15 minutes, we'll sing to a game of Believe It or Not. 314-399-9646. That is the Air Comfort Service text line. You give us a scenario. We'll tell you if we are believing it or not here on 101 ESPN. But coming up next, Alex saw a story from Frank Saravalli. Sounds like the Blues will not be interested in trading Colton Parayko this offseason. But what about their other top 4 defensemen? We'll talk about that next here on 101 ESPN. Alex, I have to imagine one of the top priorities for the Blues this offseason for Doug Armstrong is to move one of their top 4 defensemen, not named Colton Parayko. Frank Saravalli was on the Daily Face-Off live show earlier today, and he said, quote, "The one guy I do not see them moving is Colton Parayko." He then goes on to say he believes that the $6.5 million per year will look like an absolute steal a couple of years from now. That's something you've been saying for a while. He then continued, though, to discuss who they could move on the blue line. He said, "My question is, can they move one of the other guys?" He said, the point of this item on the trade board of the Blues defenseman, for multiple years, the Blues have been trying to move a defenseman. They've missed the playoffs each of the past 2 seasons, and they need to do more and to change it up. To march it back year after year with the same top 4 defensively that isn't working doesn't make sense to me, and I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense to Doug Armstrong either, end quote. Again, that all comes from Frank Saravalli, one of the most plugged-in NHL insiders in the business, saying that the Blues, he does not expect to trade Colton Parayko, no surprise there, and does think that they will be listening to offers, seeking out offers for their other top 4 defensemen. Alex, does that sound right to you?
Yeah, it does. And I mean, you don't trade Colton Parayko. Everybody that's talking about you could get Mitch Marner for him. You trade Colton Parayko, you're searching for Colton Parayko. So really it comes down to you've got 3 other guys that you have to try and deem who makes the most sense for our long-term future. My guess is take Nick Leddy off of this list as well for how he played with Colton Parayko. And we've talked a lot about how I feel like the ideal situation is to move Nick Leddy to a second pair and go find somebody to play with Colton Parayko. How realistic is that? I don't know. Maybe you draft a left-handed defenseman and Leddy is the temporary one there. And then my gut tells me they're not going to try and move Justin Falk. I mean, Armstrong has referenced him as a leader multiple times. He's worn the A. I don't see that happening. And frankly, your right side is set up really well with Kessel, with Falk, and Colton Parayko, which takes us right back to Torrey Krug. And I think with Torrey Krug, that's going to be the one that makes the most sense. As T-Bone kind of always talks about, like typically when you're at a certain age and it goes. I think with offensive defensemen, when you lose that prowess in the offensive zone or when you lose those one-time options, the offense disappears. And when you're Torrey Krug, when that goes, you don't have much else. Does another team deem him useful for their team? Probably. But the question is, how are you going to pull it off? And if you trade him, who's replacing him? Those are the questions.
That's the thing that I really wanted to hone in on here. Let's start here. Is Scott Perunovich a part of your every night roster next year? Is he in your lineup every night?
If I can move Torrey Krug, yes. If I can't move Torrey Krug, absolutely not.
Okay. Because I think that's got to be the conversation starting point. I don't think you start with, we're trading Torrey Krug, now what do we do? I think you start with, what is our plan with Scott Perunovich? If the plan is for him to be an every night player, I think then Torrey Krug is the guy that is expendable. Because Perunovich can be the quarterback for that top power play unit, and I think he'd be fine. He's probably your third pairing defensively, playing on that first power play unit. Boom, you're good. If you don't have him, though, who's quarterbacking that top power play unit, in your opinion?
To me, it's Colton Parayko. They won't do it, but it would be Colton Parayko.
Yeah, and they've shown no willingness, no interest in doing that.
Or trade candidate. Yeah. If you go out there and you get Jacob Chikrin from Ottawa, if you go out there and get Shea Theodore from Vegas, those would be the guys that you would do it. I mean, again, I would have Colton Parayko doing it, but that's a level that I'm gonna fall flat to. But yeah, I mean, Scott Perunovich becomes that. But if you trade Torrey Krug, here's the thing: you're moving on from Torrey Krug because you need to get bigger. And putting Scott Perunovich in the place of Torrey Krug, you're not getting bigger. So you're going to have to go out there and find more size for your defense. That's what Frank Saravalli is essentially talking about. Like, Armstrong knows he can't keep running it back with this top 4. Why? Because 3 of the top 4 are less than 6 foot. You got to go get some size. And if you keep Torrey Krug and Nick Leddy and Justin Falk, you're going to be the exact same team next season. So if you trade one of them, you got rid of that $6.5 million in cap space, or $4 million if you move on from Leddy. But now you're going to have to bring in somebody via trade, free agency, whatever it might be, who can be a top 4 defenseman, who fits into the same criteria as the core of your team and is big.
What was working when the Blues were good last year? The power play, right?
Yeah.
So we're just going to take that down a notch by trading Torrey Krug now? The reason why I bring that up, to me, Nick Leddy feels like the obvious trade candidate. I thought Nick Leddy was fine last year. I thought he had a pretty good season, all things considered. But if you're not going to want Scott Perunovich to be in your lineup every night, and I don't think they do. I don't think he's somebody you want in there every night. Can he be in there occasionally? Sure. I think you have a 3-man rotation on that third pair defensively with Kessel, Tucker, and Perunovich. And maybe you swap out Kessel for Falk, right? But those are the guys that I think are in conversations for that third pair defensively. I think when you look at that top pairing defensively, I would like to upgrade from Nick Leddy. I would like to have somebody that is new to be a partner with Colton Parayko. We've talked about this ad nauseum. I think Parayko's been really good, and I think if you get the right partner there, that can be a legitimate shutdown pairing. That's what I would look at. So that way I can continue to have the power play as a potential sign of optimism during games. I know it wasn't always great with Torrey Krug as the quarterback of that unit. There were some down times as well last year, but I think getting rid of him is not necessarily the answer. So
I mean, you only had 13 points from him on the power play last year. I know, he didn't score a goal.
Totally fair. I do think he moves the puck better than the other guys that you used in that position, other than Scott Perunovich. Perunovich, I think, was really good on the power play at times, but it requires you to have him in the lineup to be able to get that out of him.
Yeah, I would put Justin Falk on the power play in that situation and move on from Torrey Krug. And honestly, I would move on from Scott Perunovich as well and go out there and find another defenseman to be a power play guy for me. I mean, I would try and reinvent the wheel with my defense. Sure. I would look at it as, because the thing about if you move on from Nick Leddy, now Torrey Krug is going to be playing 20 minutes a night.
But I'm trying to upgrade from Nick Leddy. So I'm moving Leddy out and bringing somebody else in. I can't tell you who that player is because I don't know who's available right now, but that would be my goal, is I'm moving the salary from Nick Leddy to be able to replace it with somebody else.
Yeah, and that's just going to be, and I think you're going to be more likely to pull that one off, because I don't know if there's going to be a team that wants to take on Torrey Krug after last season, but I would look at it as next year, my top 4 is insert trade candidate here, whether it's one of the defensemen from Ottawa, or maybe it's Shea Theodore, or maybe you just sign somebody, or maybe you draft somebody if you trade up. But it's insert defenseman here: Colton Parayko, Justin Falk, Nick Leddy. That's my top 4. And if Scott Perunovich is still here, great. If not, you got Tyler Tucker and Matt Kessel.
Yeah, I think Krug would be the guy they would like to move because of the salary for so many different reasons. He's also 33 years old, and Nick Leddy was at least solid, what you had with him last year with Colton Parayko. I think what they're going to find is it's really hard to move any of these guys other than Nick Leddy. I think Nick Leddy's deal is the most tradable deal right now. It's 2 years left, $4 million per year. Another team could take him on, put him in their second pairing defensively, just plop him in there. He can play a little bit on the power play. He's fine. He's fine for you. The other guys that have 3 years left on their contracts, Krug and Falk, at $6.5 per year. Both of them are early to mid-30s with some injury questions now, both coming off of, I would say, less than stellar campaigns at best. I think that's going to be a really hard deal to make if you're Doug Armstrong. And, oh, by the way, they both have full no-trade clause.
Yeah, that's the other thing, too.
So
you might be stuck with it no matter what. Like, I'm looking at this right now. Teams that had awful power plays last season. Philadelphia, well, that's not going to happen. Columbus, Buffalo. I'm looking at teams that are at least somewhat contenders that would consider Torrey Krug. Like, Ottawa's a really interesting one. They were right there with you in terms of how bad their power play was. Do they need a power play specialist? Maybe that's a deal that can come off. Winnipeg is another one that needs power play help. But again, none of this matters when all 3 of these guys are talking about have no trade clauses. Now, if you were to ask me who's the most likely out of the 3 to accept a trade, I think it would be Torrey Krug, because I feel like he would have been willing to accept the no trade this past offseason if it wasn't to Philadelphia.
If you're the Blues and it would require you to eat $2.5 million in salary to move on from one of those guys per year, most likely, let's say Torrey Krug, let's keep going down this path. Say, okay, Blues are now retaining $2.5 million per year for the next 3 seasons on his salary. So the new team is acquiring $4 million. Mm-hmm. Do you think, A, as a Blues fan, that would be worth it for you to get rid of his other $4 million on the cap, and you could then go replace him in your lineup? And B, do you think that's something that another team would be interested in?
Yes, on both. I think a team would be interested in that, because you're telling me for $4 million, I get a number 1 power play quarterback on my team. And it's the criteria with this is I have to have a group of players on a power play that I feel like are just missing a defenseman who can quarterback it. Because the reason Krug didn't work out on the power play that last year is because the weapons around him stunk. But I think a team would look at that and say $4 million compared to going out and spending $7 million on Brandon Montour and 3 years of it. Yeah, I'll accept that. And I personally think Blues fans would be on board with that because that $4 million you're saving for the next 3 years opens up the possibility to go out there and sign a defenseman or trade assets for a defenseman. Like Shea Theodore is making $5 million next year. So essentially you're saving $1 million on bringing in a better defenseman in your top 4.
One thing to get to here from the 314, the Air Comfort Service text line is 314-399-9646. We'll get to Believe It or Not here in just a moment. Somebody said, guys, what about buying out Torrey Krug and going about it that way?
That you don't do.
So here's what the cap hit would be in future years if you did do that. This season, $333,000. You basically save everything. But the Blues don't need that salary now. They need it in future seasons. From 2025 to 2030, you'd be paying $2.3 million every single season. You don't buy out Torrey Krug. If you're going down that path, you do what we just talked about, which is retaining salary. Because you can retain up to 50% of his cap hit each year. You could do 3.2 essentially per year for the next 3 years. After that is when you really need to be able to have the savings because that's when you're probably contending again. You don't want to have that $2.3 million cap hit on your books every single season when you're trying to contend again. And it's not the way I would recommend going about it. So I don't think buying out Torrey Krug makes any sense whatsoever for the Blues. You're going to have to trade him, and you're going to have to find a place that he's willing to go to if you want to remove his salary from your books.
Yeah, and it's not the same situation, but look at what Minnesota's been dealing with Suter and Parise. Again, you're not spending $11 million in your cap space for how long they've been because that has really handcuffed them, and the cap is going up, so 2.3 doesn't seem like a lot, but you're not a team that's in the position to do that. If you were winning a Stanley Cup next year and Torrey Krug was a hindrance to that, you buy him out.
As an owner, do you want to pay $14 million for a player to not play for you or no? No. Because that's ultimately what it comes down to.
Not in the situation you are as an owner with this team that's trying to build it back up.
Just keep them lit. Hey, Are we trying to contend next year? If yes, then let's go do it. Sure, do what you need to do to be able to win. But if we're not, if we're just going to be out there trying to retool, well, then have Torrey Krug go play for me for $6.5 million, not me buying out the 14.
I think the other situation you'd consider buying him out is if you were just gifted a perfect scenario of a young defenseman who wasn't costing you much for the next 3 years, and you said, cool, we can suck up $2 million for the next 4-5 seasons if we're getting that guy. But you're not getting that guy.
He's Alex, that's T-Bone on BK, Believe It or Not, coming up next year on 101 ESPN. It's BK with Alex Ferrario, and the biggest pro football contests in Vegas are back, baby. Circa Survivor and Circa Millions are now up to $16 million in guaranteed prizes. 2 ways to win, no rake. Circa Survivor contests select one team each week with no point spread. It's straight up. It is the longest, the last longest, and you can win it all. $10 million is guaranteed in the Circa Survivor contest. In the Circa Millions, you make 5 picks against the spread each week for your share of $6 million guaranteed. Quarterly and full season payouts are there for you. Enter in Nevada. Play from anywhere. Visit circasports.com for the details.
And if you don't want to get involved with that, why don't just check out the Circa Sports app. You can see the tight money line splits. It's all about bringing in the most money possible, and that's what Circa Sports offers. They're not limiting players based off of their winnings. Check them out. If you or someone you know may have a problem with gambling, call 1-800-GAMBLER or text ILGAMB to 833-234.
Oh, sing it, boys. It's my last day
This
here.
T-Bone's weekend.
Oh, yeah, this is great. What a way to start the weekend. Believe it or not, I'm walking on air. I never thought I could feel so
Free, flying away on a wing and a prayer. Who could it be?
Believe it or not, it's just me.
314-399-9646.
We need to have a meeting. We need to have a damn meeting.
Text line for Believe It or Not. You give us a scenario, we'll tell you if we're believing it or not. Here on 101.
This is-
People come here for the same thing on Thursdays,
Yes.
and when you try and switch it up, you ruin it for
Alex,
people.
you switch it up every week, man. I wanted to follow your lead. I want to be
But
more
he
like
hits the note.
And do I? I feel like I'm the same person on that
I
song.
actually thought he-
I feel like I'm the same person every week with that song.
I mean, occasionally I forget the words and change those
Yeah.
up. But
I mean, I only got a couple of very minimum parts in this. This is T-Bone's song, but we can't switch it
yeah,
up.
dude, this is our time to shine. It's the only reason people
you
listen
don't
to the
ask-
show.
You don't ask George Michael to step onto the stage and just start singing differently a Careless Whisper.
Oh, yeah, no,
But
you
if
don't.
he did,
No!
I'd boo.
You know what? People don't want to be intimate when Careless
sometimes
Whisper changes.
You gotta switch it up a little bit.
You
So we
don't-
switched it up just a couple of notes.
You don't
couple of
ask
octaves.
You're not invited to BK and Ferrario karaoke.
You
night.
don't
I
ask.
will be. You know what? You guys can do the show on Monday. It's just you.
Thank
Fine,
goodness.
by us. You don't ask Boys to Men to switch up I'll Make Love to You. When you turn it on, it's the same thing every single day.
Fair. But you know, there's like
Amen,
there-
brother.
cover songs. Sometimes your favorite band does a cover. And you're
Cover
like, you know
songs are
what?
trash.
I actually kind of really.
Show me a successful cover song.
Yeah.
Oh, I think when I go to a concert and they do a cover song, there's times where I really enjoy it.
No, because I'm thinking when they sing it, I'm like, damn, I'm going to go listen to the original once.
Oh, really?
Once this
Sometimes
concert's
I think
over.
they're better.
I'm
than the
more-
original.
gotta
I don't
hear
think
the
I've ever heard
No?
a cover song that I've liked.
Bleachers does covers every time they come in town, and I think they do them really well.
I like Bleachers. I sat on them a lot in high school.
Let's get into Believe It or Not. All right, boys, let's start with this.
T-Bone's still like, wait, what does that mean?
Oh, phew.
Yeah, pretty much.
Bleachers, man.
The Chiefs are doing OTAs right now, something that might not exist a year from now. Just an extended.
Was Rasheed Rice there?
He is, actually. It'll be an extended training camp in the future. Dave Taub, one of the best special teams coaches in the NFL, Alex, after the practice today was asked about what they're going to do for kickoffs because there is a new kickoff rule that's being implemented. It's basically the old XFL rule. He said that they are potentially going to have position players, like a safety or a running back or whatever, as the kicker because they found that during the XFL season, 25 to 40% of the tackles on kickoffs were made by the kicker.
Damn.
And so something that they're looking into is Justin Reed, their safety, and Luis Rees-Zammit, a guy that they signed that's a former rugby star. They're seeing if they can be the new kicker for the Kansas City Chiefs this year for kickoffs specifically. Guys, believe it or not, we're going to find out that a lot of players around the NFL have a talent that we were unaware of if this is something that catches on around the league.
I mean, believe it. Why wouldn't you just put the safety, in the back? Why do you have to have the safety kicking?
I don't think I'm following. Because if the kicker is involved in 2 out of every 5 tackles, you don't want your kicker being involved in tackles. That's not the role that you want for your kicker.
So they're replacing the kicker with a safety.
Correct. He's going to be doing the kicking off now.
That's what I'm saying. I just why wouldn't you just hold a safety back to stand in front of the kicker so that the kicker doesn't have to make the tackle?
Because
now you're playing too short.
Yeah, now you have two guys that aren't going to be a part of your kickoff team.
That's wild, man. I mean, I'm here for
the way
it.
that everything's structured now, where you've got like the one line of defense. The kicker is the guy that has the clearest path to that tackle. So they're the most likely one to make the tackle, according to their research. I haven't looked into this at all, but I find it to be really interesting.
I can't wait for those kicks to just look abysmal.
Are we going to start seeing like wide receivers doing kicks at the combine moving forward because this could pick up? I'm not going to believe that we see this take off this year.
Over under how many squib kicks we see because of the safety.
I don't think you're going to see this take off this year. It may be a year or two before maybe you really see it take off. Because I think a lot of teams will go, whoa. We're not the Chiefs. We really can't be trying that kind of frisky behavior on a kickoff. But I will not believe this.
Or why don't we just start bulking up our kickers?
Yeah.
Have them start eating their wings.
Pat McAfee made tackles.
Yeah. Those are real men. It's going out there and just diving around and taking people's knees out.
I'm going to be really interested in this. I'm going to believe this. I think we are going to see teams start to do, if there's success with the Chiefs. Now, Luis Rees-Zammit is a different category of this. He's a former rugby star. They signed him in part for the new special teams rules, and we'll see if he even makes the roster. But like if Justin Reed ends up being a guy that is doing the kickoffs, first of all, kind of risky to have a star safety as your kickoff guy. That could be interesting. That could certainly be a new way for guys to make the roster as well. That brings a new definition to special teams value.
I am here for Rodrigo Blankenship making tackles out there on the field. I want 27-year-old, 183 pounds of him making tackles with those goggles on. Guys, believe it or not, the Blues with their 16th overall pick will select a defenseman.
I mean, I have no idea, so I'll say not, because I think that based on what you have told me and based on what I've read elsewhere, it seems like most of those guys are going in the top 10. So I'll say not just because of that. It was way easier. It's way easier to break down the draft. Like the Cardinal stuff that we're going to see this year for the draft, that is so much easier to break down because they're inside of the top 10. Once you get beyond that, it's so hard to predict.
That's what you got me here for, man.
Yeah.
I got him locked in.
Well, good for you. I would say I'm not going to believe it just because I think even at that spot at 16, I saw the write-up today from Pronman and Wheeler, and I think there's somebody else on that, The Athletic, and they said, well, I thought about going with a defenseman here, but I'm going to go with the center because I think he's the best field player. I think that's what just happens is it would be a mistake for the Blues to reach for a defenseman. So I will say not believe it just because I think you're probably going to see more forwards sitting in that range.
I'm gonna believe it because I was reading that same mock draft, and this is why I brought it up, because the guy that was selected after the Blues in that mock draft that they did was that Adam Juracek, the brother of the guy that plays for the Columbus Blue Jackets, and he's dropped because of the injury that kept him out half the season. I think you're going to see a couple of guys drop in terms of status in the draft because everybody, especially these types of teams, want the prolific goal scorers. They want guys that profile as, they could be a 30 or 40 goal scorer for us. I think that allows teams to maybe slip on a defenseman. I do think the Blues are going to spend their pick on a defenseman, and it might not look like the best available player.
Guys, believe it or not, we will see Ryan Helsley break the single-season saves record in Cardinals history. The record currently is held by Trevor Rosenthal at 48, which he did back in 2015.
Helsley's at 18?
Yeah.
I'm going to say believe it. This would require them to be good the rest of the year. It would require them to stay in the race. It would require Helsley to stay healthy. And it would require them to continue going to him the way that they have, which is a lot of usage. And I think all of those three things are going to happen. So I'm going to say believe it.
I'm going to say not believe it because I think they're going to have to be relying on him a lot this season, which means a lot of wear and tear. And at some point, I think you're going to have to deal with an injury of Ryan Helsley, or at least some type of, hey, we need to step back a little bit with him. That is a massive accomplishment for a closing pitcher. And I know he is on pace for it right now, but I'm going to say not believe this.
I'm going to believe it, but I don't think they'll be as good as that 2015 team, because that 2015 team won 100 games, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. But I don't think that this Cardinals team, and I don't know why this is, but they can't win big for some reason. The reason Helsley's getting a whole bunch of saves for a 500 team is because they're not winning by big margins. They've needed him a lot because of that. So I don't know if they're going to be able to separate a lot of games that way. So that's why I think he's going to have a shot to do it, and I'll take my chances on it and say believe it.
All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for some of your believe it or not suggestions. This one comes from the 314. Guys, believe it or not, the Cardinals' failed trades are overblown. This comes from the text. The guys that we have traded have shown some flashes, but now they're kind of mid. Arozarena, Garcia, Alcantara, he blew out his elbow, O'Neill, Lane Thomas. Believe it or not, the Cardinals' failed trades are overblown.
I'm going to say not believe this because even if Arozarena is going through it right now, he still had a really good stretch where he was the best player on Tampa Bay. It got him to World Series, if I'm not mistaken. And I understand BK falls in line of like the Ozuna trade was a good trade, but I still think that was a failed trade for you because you didn't win anything with Marcell Ozuna, and now you've got two guys that are Cy Young caliber pitchers elsewhere.
Yeah.
The Garcia one I agree with.
Yeah, and I'm not going to believe it because of the Arozarena trade. I think Ozuna was a failed trade, even though they had to do it at the time. It still can be classified as both. You had to do it and you failed at it. So I would say not believe it because I think those two are significant blows to the organization. Some of those, though, I don't have an issue with. The Lane Thomas one, it doesn't really bother me. The O'Neill one doesn't really bother me, but there are two significant misses: the Arozarena and trading both Alcantara and Gallen for Ozuna. So
yeah, I think they are overblown. I think that it's really the Arozarena one is real. You failed. That sucked. It's one of the worst trades that anybody's made in the last 5 years. It's just a bad deal. It is what it is. Sometimes you miss. I think the Adolis Garcia one gets way more attention than it deserves. I think the Tyler O'Neill one, everybody was ready to move on from him, and now he's hurt, which we all knew was going to happen. Lane Thomas has been a slightly above league average hitter, and I don't know what his role would be for this team right now. I don't know what it would have been for them in previous seasons as well, because they had guys that profile as being better players then and future than Lane Thomas. The one that we'll kind of have to go back and forth on, and we don't need to spend any time on it today, is the deal that they end up making for Marcell Ozuna. Thought it was a smart deal at the time. I continue to support their decision to do it now. It blew up in their faces because they thought they had a surplus of pitching. Turned out they didn't, because a lot of those guys either didn't end up working out or got hurt. Alex Reyes gets hurt. That sucks. Jack Flaherty isn't the guy you thought he was going to be. Bummer. Dakota Hudson gets hurt and then isn't the guy that you thought he was going to be. Man, that really is a blow to you as well. Luke Weaver never became that guy, and now suddenly, instead of having a surplus of pitching talent, the guys that you needed are down in Miami and eventually in Arizona.
I will say this.
I'm going to say it is overblown, believe it.
I do think Lane Thomas could have a role on this team. In fact, I would kind of circle him as a potential trade target for the St. Louis Cardinals.
I just don't think he's like the missing link.
No, I agree with that. I agree with that. And I do agree that trade is overstated. Like, you got what you really needed in that deal, which was John Lester at the time, which I can't believe I'm still saying. But I do think Lane Thomas would have a role on this team right now. He'd be the perfect right-handed bat that they're looking for as a fourth outfielder.
He'd be a better Dylan Carlson.
Yeah, true.
I mean, the hope is like Dylan Carlson can get to a 750 OPS, which is what he is against left-handed pitching, Lane Thomas. And if you can get that from Dylan Carlson, you have Lane Thomas already on your roster.
How are you feeling about that?
I've lost all hope with Dylan Carlson.
Him getting to a 750 OPS against lefties, I can see that. That's not a high ask.
No, but
for him it might be though.
Yeah,
he does.
He looks
tiny.
Yeah. He looks thin.
He looks very insecure at the plate too.
Well,
I feel like he's been a little better lately. I don't know if I'm seeing stuff there, but
It's those red glasses, man.
guys, believe it or not, Jordan Walker will be a true power hitter will never, be a true power hitter and will therefore be a miss for the Cardinals.
Man,
I'm not
people
believing
really
this.
are out on him.
I don't feel this way at all. I think he's going to be fine. I really do. I think Jordan Walker is eventually going to be fine. I think he's still hitting for average, and I think down the road you're going to see him hit 25-plus home runs in a Cardinals uniform, and I think that will be sooner rather than later. For whatever reason, it hasn't happened this year, and that happens for a lot of prospects across the league in their second year at the big league level, so I'm not believing this. I think he's going to be fine.
I'm not believing this, too. Like, I don't know if he's ever going to be a pure power hitter, but to call him a miss in that draft spot, like I'm looking at some of the guys that were selected behind him, and like Bobby Miller, I think is the only one right now that people would be like, oh, you should have taken Bobby Miller, but none of these other guys I've even heard of. So I don't. Jordan Walker is going to be a piece for this team. Is he going to be the savior for this team? That one I don't know anymore, but no, I'm not believing this.
Yeah, I'm not going to believe this either. I think he's going to end up rounding into his power, but it's just taking longer than was expected. Like, sure. I wouldn't be shocked if he ends up becoming a guy that could do like 26 homers, 94 RBIs, hit like 260, and have right around 800 OPS. By the way, you know who I just named? Somebody that BK's comped him to before, Vlad Guerrero Jr. That was his season last year. I wouldn't be shocked at all if he put up numbers like that.
That's the guy that I think he makes the most sense to be comps to. Now, I got some pushback when I mentioned that down at the ballpark. People said, yeah, one of them has really long levers, long legs, long arms. The other guy is very compact, and Vlad Guerrero Jr. So they go about it in different ways, but I think they could end up getting to very similar production at the big league level. Coming up next, what's the lesson in Andre Pallante? It looks like he might be your 5-starter for the foreseeable future, at least. Is there a lesson in the way that the Cardinals have approached this? We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN.
Terry Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. Cardinals beat the Reds yesterday 5-3 as they take 2 of 3 from Cincinnati. They are off today. They'll be back in action tomorrow, and they start a 3-game set at the Philadelphia Phillies. 5:40 will be first pitch tomorrow night. Miles Michaelis on the mound versus Aaron Nola for Philadelphia. The Sports Update is brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
So what's the plan with Andre Pallante moving forward? It's something that we don't really know. We know he's going to be a starter for them for the foreseeable future, though, and that's a big boost for the Cardinals' rotation. They needed it in a bad way. Back in 2022, he had right around a 4 ERA over the course of 10 starts for the Cardinals. They went 5-5 in those 10 starts. Since then, though, he's primarily been a reliever for the Cardinals, Alex, and he's been okay. He's gotten them out of some jams. Last year, I would say it was a down year relative to what we saw from him as a bullpen arm in 2022. Severe ground ball pitcher. The lack of a shift definitely impacts him, and their lack of infield defense last year, I think, was a problem for him. It's better this year, and now you've got him in a more advantageous situation. Alex, if we end up going down this path and Andre Pallante finds out he's a solid number 5 starter for the Cardinals, he can be for them what we hoped last year Dakota Hudson would have been for the Cardinals. What is the lesson there, in your opinion? Or is there a lesson in the way that he was handled, how he got to the big leagues, what he is now as a pitcher? Like, what will be the lesson from Andre Pallante if he does become a successful number 5 starter in your mind?
I mean, I don't really know of a lesson learned from that, to be honest with you, because I'd be surprised if that had success, because I feel like we've always done this to where it's like, oh, maybe this guy's got it, and then it doesn't work out. I guess the only thing that I can look at with it is the Cardinals were somewhat right with Pallante, because, I mean, we were kind of trashing on them when they did this with Pallante and Thompson, and when it went back and forth to the bullpen to a starter, and then what they did, and Pallante talked about it yesterday, was sent him down because he wanted to get reps, he wanted to get continuous opportunities, and he was working on certain things to get different types of batters out. I mean, for somebody who is very quick to judge the Cardinals with some of their roster decisions, if there's a lesson to be learned, if this works out for him, I got to give a little bit more faith to the Cardinals in terms of development with these pitchers.
I think the lesson to be learned, if Pallante works out, and we'll see if it works out, and honestly, it probably should be a lesson for the Cardinals moving forward anyways, is if you have a bullpen that is built deep enough, you don't have to rush some starters to the big leagues to become bullpen arms. Think of some of the guys that they didn't get to experiment with that were starters in the minor leagues. You had Jordan Hicks. Well, what happens? He impresses in spring training by throwing 105, and they go, man, our bullpen's not very deep. What if we had that in the bullpen? Same with Ryan Helsley. Now, his is a little bit different because he did have some injuries to where it looks like that's when they moved away from him being a starter. But they saw, oh, max effort at 100 miles per hour. Hey, we could use that in our bullpen. Our bullpen's not very deep, so let's add Ryan Helsley to the mix. I think the same thing happened with Pallante in 2022. Was a starter in the minor leagues. They looked at him. They saw him in spring training and said, man, our bullpen options are not very good. Let's bring him with us. Let's see if that high ground ball rate will play well out of our pen. And it did, but then they ultimately move him back to being a starter. I think what the Cardinals should be learning through this experiment with Andre Pallante, if this ends up working out, a guy that says, hey, I like starting more because I can get more in rhythm with my pitches, the more that I am actually throwing in a baseball game, I think the lesson to be learned is construct a deep bullpen, that both at the major league level and with a little bit of a pipeline down AAA, which I think they've done this year, and that allows you to have some of these starters continue to develop in the minor leagues, fine-tune their craft before they get up here, and you don't have to rush them into a bullpen role.
Stop forcing these guys into bullpen roles. That would be my lesson from this. Like, Andre Pallante wasn't good enough as a reliever to be like, yeah, we got to have that guy in the bullpen. No, he's got more value as a starter for you. So keep him down in AAA and allow him to use T-Bone's term, get some seasoning and continue to develop as a starter. I think the Cardinals are way too fast to say, oh, not a starter, definitely a reliever. Did it with Jordan Hicks. Not a starter. We got to get him up here. We got to get him up. Got to get him up. Look at that fastball. We got to get that up here. And so they used him at the back end of the pen, and it was successful. But then never gave him a full offseason to try to become a starter. And I think that was a miss on their part. I think we're seeing that right now. They did give him an opportunity to be a starter, but it was in the regular season trying to learn on the job. That's not a real opportunity. I think they should do this with Ryan Helsley. He might break their all-time saves record for a single season this year. That's very possible. And what I'm saying would be something that is highly risky. I think this offseason they should tell him, hey, can you come back as a starter next year? Try to get stretched out. Worst case scenario, he's right back to being a dominant reliever for you again next season. Best case scenario, hot damn, now we've got a dude that might be a legitimate front-end arm that can be a starter for us. Go back and look at Ryan Helsley's numbers in the minors. He was really good as a starter, guys, but they put him into the bullpen and he just never left. Liberatore to me is a different conversation because I don't know that we've seen the same success with him as a starter.
Wasn't really that successful in the minors either.
We've seen these other guys have success as starters in the minor leagues, and then they get pigeonholed into becoming a bullpen arm for the Cardinals. If there is a lesson for them with Andre Pallante, it is to keep in mind that, yes, he can help you in the bullpen, but he is much more valuable as a sixth starter because you're always going to have injuries. Having guys that are at the ready, stretched out, ready to go, to be a big league starter when you need them, or to come up for a doubleheader, anything like that, that is so valuable. And the Cardinals lacked it. Each of the past 2 seasons, they need it. And that's why guys like Andre Pallante can have some value for you that I don't think the Cardinals put enough emphasis on. So to me, that's the lesson from him.
Yeah, and it goes to show you that it benefits the Cardinals because then you don't have to spend so much time in the offseason trying to do what you did this year of having to sign 3 different starting pitchers so that you can provide depth to it. If you can allot some of these guys the time to figure it out as the starting pitchers, which hopefully they're doing the same thing with Zach Thompson right now, where they're saying just go for it and be the starting pitcher for us. You do provide that depth so you don't have to spend necessary assets on finding those guys at the beginning of the season or at the trade deadline.
And I think to an extent they are learning their lesson a little bit because, like, they're not going to bring up Tink Hintz to be a reliever at any point. Like, you know, like next season, if he comes out, he's going to get more of a shot in spring training next year would be my assumption. I don't think if he impresses, they're going to go, oh, man, our bullpen, whew, we could really use a Tink Hintz in that pen. No, they're learning their lesson. He's a little bit different because he has more prospect pedigree than like a Ryan Helsley or an Andre Pallante had. But I think there are some guys that will fit into this conversation in the minor leagues that they will look at and hopefully be learning the lesson from based on what they've seen from Jordan Hicks outside the organization and from what we could potentially see from Andre Pallante this season.
He's Tanner Hendrickson. That is Alex Ferrario, and I'm Brandon Kiley. Coming up next, we're going to hit the BK and Ferrario Rewind here on 101 ESPN. Hey, if you guys missed anything from today's show, be sure to check out the podcast page, 101ESPN.com, and the free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. It's all presented by
Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers.
You can always check us out on YouTube as well at youtube.com/101ESPNSTL. The studio cams are powered by the Air Alliance team. The Graveyard Chat is off and running over there as it is each and every day. All right, to put a bow on the series in Cincinnati and really this stretch of games that the Cardinals are playing right now, Alex, they've won 12 of their last 15. They're playing good baseball. They're a half game back now in the wild card standings. I think this wasn't the most impressive series that I've seen from the Cardinals. I am really impressed, though, that they were able to come back and win the last 2 games of that series because of what stood in front of them with yesterday, them basically not having a starter that was announced until the day prior. They were kind of light in their bullpen. Kyle Gibson gave you an unbelievable performance. I remember on Tuesday when we came in, we're like, man, just win one of the next 2. Go 1-2 in this series. You'll be fine, and then you'll be set up with an off day going into that series in Philadelphia. Pretty impressive for them to take 2 out of 3 once again in Cincinnati.
I'll give them credit. They're finding different ways to win baseball games, which I didn't think this team was possible of doing at the beginning of the season. They were finding ways to lose games. But when you think of how they won against the Angels, which that's the one we all said, they were basically gifted, how they won against Boston, how they won against the Cubs, especially for, 8 hours of rain delays that they went through in those games. And then that Cincinnati Reds one. And I think the Reds was the one that got me closer to putting the conductor hat on because you lost that first.
You're not welcome.
Wow.
You can't have the conductor hat.
BK.
All right, you want to root for the Brewers, at least they're in first place.
That's true. I mean, at least it's a team that actually can win the division, unlike one that just is going to back into the playoffs. They lost that first game of the Cincinnati Reds series, and I thought that was going to be the down spiral. But you found a way to come back against a good pitcher, and then with Pallante, you find a way to hold on with that one. They're finding different ways to win baseball games, which to me, that shows at least a team that has a winning mindset.
Yeah, it's impressive that they're able to keep this momentum still going after losing that first game, playing in a very difficult ballpark to play in Cincinnati. And they're able to do it still while you're still waiting for one of the guys to get going. And what I mean by that is Nolan Arenado. I think maybe we'll see.
Him yesterday.
Oh, he would have went 4 for 4 with probably 2 bombs.
We'd be more in.
Good thing they did it. Now they've got a fresh and
now he's lost his timing.
And they won the game 5-3.
Now he's not going to have confidence against the Philadelphia Phillies.
By the way, Matt Carpenter, you needed him in the lineup yesterday, so it was a good thing he was out there.
If we start saying that Matt Carpenter is going to be the secret sauce, I'm out on this team.
Goldie's continuing to play well. I thought he had a good series against Cincinnati. If you just get Arenado going and you can do it on this road trip and continue to build this momentum when they get ready to come back home, and they've got a tough 6 games coming up. Philly is one of the best teams in the National League, and then you've got Houston's playing pretty good baseball. So if they can build momentum at home, continue it on the road on their way back home for their next homestand, I may have to buy in even if Arenado's not playing well because that is a sign of a team that is finding a way to win without some of their best players.
All right, Alex, no baseball tonight for us here in St. Louis, so I'm going to be paying attention to the hockey game. Panthers, Rangers. I love this series. I'll be totally honest with you guys. I don't have a ton of interest in the Western Conference side, the Stars Oilers series. It's fun, but it's not capturing my attention the way that the Eastern Conference one is. This is a heavyweight title fight in every possible sense of the word. This feels like old school hockey. 2 teams, heavy, stars all over the place. They're tied at 2 right now in this series. We're heading to New York. Alex, how do you view this one heading into Game 5 tonight?
I think the series is over after the last game. I think the Panthers have shown that they're the bigger opponent in this series, and I think you're starting to see the New York Rangers team crumble. I think it's 7 straight games. Zibanejad hasn't scored a goal. Your boy Chris Kreider's been struggling so much that he had to throw Matthew Tkachuk's mouthpiece out of the rink. They're struggling. And I think this is the Panthers. I think they win I think they win tonight, and then I think they win in Game 6 and end the series. And I'll stand by what I've always said: the Eastern Conference will be the Stanley Cup champion this year.
I'm going the other direction. I think home ice advantage is a real thing at Madison Square Garden. I think it's a really hard place to play. Those fans get after it. I think New York will win tonight, and I think part of why I'm going to this direction, I think this series has been super tight, man. You've seen 3 games go to overtime already. Each of the last 3 games have gone to OT, and that's with some of the stars not showing up yet for New York. This is when it happens. Game 5, stars come out for New York. I think the Rangers end up winning this one. We don't go to overtime this time. It's 4-2 with an empty netter to put away at the end.
I think Florida wins this one 5-0 after that backing from BK. So this one's not going to be close tonight.
4-2 Florida Panthers in regulation.
He's Alex Ferrario. That is Tanner Hendrickson. I'm Brandon Kiley. We will talk to you guys tomorrow at 11 a.m. T-Bone out tomorrow, so we'll have Grant Francis, I do believe.
No, we have Bradford.
We have Bradford Bruns in with us tomorrow from 11 to 2. We'll talk to you guys in. Craig Berube coming up on the Fast Lane. Fast Lane coming up next here on 101 ESPN.